There is a moment at the end of The Lord of the Rings that has haunted readers for 70 years. A moment that most fans misunderstand, that casual viewers get completely wrong, and that even devoted Tolkien readers rarely grasp in its full depth. Frodo stands at the crack of doom. He holds the ring over the fire. The quest is complete. The journey is over. All he has to do is open his hand and let it fall. And he doesn't. Frodo claims the ring. After everything, after the Shire, after Weathertop, after Moria, after Amon Hen, after the Dead Marshes, after Shelob, after the plains of Gorgoroth, Frodo puts the ring on his finger and declares it his own. The hobbit who has carried the weight of the world for 6 months stands at the edge of the abyss and refuses to let go. Most fans treat this as a failure, a tragic failure perhaps, a sympathetic failure. But a failure nonetheless. Frodo failed. Frodo broke. Frodo wasn't strong enough to finish the job. And it took Gollum, mad, broken, treacherous Gollum, to stumble into the fire with the ring and do what Frodo could not. But this reading is wrong, not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. The moment at the crack of doom is not a failure at all. It is the most important theological and moral statement in the entire Lord of the Rings, and understanding why Frodo couldn't destroy the ring changes everything about the way you read the story. Tonight I want to explain what actually happened on Mount Doom. Not just what happened in the story, what happened in the meaning, in the theology, in the deep structure of the mythology that Tolkien spent his entire life building. Because the answer to why couldn't Frodo destroy the ring is not because Frodo was too weak. The answer is far stranger, far more profound, and far more beautiful than that. Stay with me. This one goes deep. Part 1. The nature of the ring. To understand why Frodo couldn't destroy the ring, we need to start with what the ring actually is. Because the ring is not what most fans think it is. Most fans think of the ring as a weapon, a tool of power, a magical object that makes you invisible and gives you the ability to dominate the wills of others. And the ring is all of those things. But the ring is something more, something that Tolkien designed with extraordinary theological precision, something that functions not just as a plot device, but as a statement about the nature of evil itself. The ring is a piece of Sauron, not metaphorically, not symbolically. Literally, when Sauron forged the One Ring in the fires of Orodruin, he poured into it a substantial portion of his own native power, his will, his malice, his desire to dominate, his cruelty, his intelligence. The ring is not a tool that Sauron made. The ring is an extension of Sauron's being, a fragment of his soul, externalist in gold, given independent existence in the world. This is why the ring is dangerous, not because of what it does, but because of what it is. The ring is a piece of a dark god's mind, and that mind is always active, always working, always seeking to accomplish its purpose. The ring does not sit passively on a finger. The ring thinks. The ring wills. The ring desires. The ring reaches out to the minds of those who carry it and begins, slowly, patiently, imperceptibly, to reshape them in its master's image. The ring wants to return to Sauron. That is its primary drive, the fundamental orientation of the fragment of will that Sauron placed within it. The ring wants to be found. The ring wants to be worn. The ring wants to corrupt its bearer until the bearer becomes a servant of the ring's purpose, which is Sauron's purpose, which is domination. And the ring is patient. The ring waited 2,500 years at the bottom of the Anduin. The ring waited another 500 years in Gollum's cave. The ring can wait, because the ring's will is Sauron's will, and Sauron's will is as patient as stone. Part 2. How the ring works. The ring does not corrupt through force. The ring corrupts through desire. This is critical. The ring does not overpower its bearer, does not seize control of the bearer's mind, and compel obedience the way a puppeteer controls a puppet. The ring works through the bearer's own desires, amplifying them, distorting them, transforming them from natural wishes into consuming obsessions. The ring finds what you want and offers to give it to you. Boromir wants to save his city. The ring whispers, "Take me, and I will give you the strength to save Gondor." Galadriel wants to preserve the beauty of the world. The ring whispers, "Take me, and I will give you the power to halt the fading, to keep Lothlorien beautiful forever." Gandalf wants to do good, to fight evil, to set the world right. The ring whispers, "Take me, and I will give you the power to do all the good you have ever dreamed of doing." The temptation is always the same. The temptation is always your own desire, magnified to the point of madness. The ring does not create new desires. The ring takes the desires that are already there. The love of beauty, the love of power, the love of justice, the love of home, and inflates them until they consume everything else. This is why Gandalf refuses the ring. Not because Gandalf lacks the strength to wield it. Gandalf is a Maya, a being of enormous spiritual power, one of the few beings in Middle-earth who could conceivably master the ring's primary functions. Gandalf refuses the ring because Gandalf understands the mechanism. Gandalf knows that the ring would take his desire to do good and transform it into a desire to control, would turn the wise counselor into a tyrant, the servant of the free peoples into their master. "Do not tempt me." Gandalf shouts when Frodo offers him the ring. The fear in Gandalf's voice is the fear of someone who knows exactly how the temptation works and knows that he is vulnerable to it. Galadriel understands the mechanism too. When Frodo offers her the ring in Lothlorien, Galadriel does not simply refuse. Galadriel shows Frodo what she would become if she accepted. Galadriel transforms, becomes vast, beautiful, terrible. A queen of light and shadow, who would rule not through cruelty but through the overwhelming, suffocating, inescapable beauty of her presence. "All shall love me and despair," she cries, and the cry is not a threat. It is a warning. It is a vision of what the ring would make of the noblest being in Middle-earth, a tyrant clothed in beauty, a prison dressed as paradise, a domination so lovely that the dominated would not recognize their chains. And then Galadriel refuses. "I pass the test," she says. "I will diminish, and go into the west and remain Galadriel." The refusal costs her everything, costs her the beauty, the power, the preservation of Lothlorien. Galadriel's refusal is the sacrifice of everything she has built in exchange for the preservation of everything she is. The ring offers her the world. Galadriel chooses herself. The ring's method of corruption is important because it explains why Frodo's failure at the crack of doom is not a moral failure in the ordinary sense. The ring does not tempt you with evil. The ring tempts you with good, with your own good, with the things you love most, with the values and the desires that define you as a person. The ring takes the best of you and turns it against you. And the closer you get to the source of the ring's power, to the fire in which it was made, the stronger the temptation becomes. Part 3. The escalation. The ring's power is not constant. The ring's power grows. This is a fact that many fans overlook, a fact that changes everything about the way we understand Frodo's journey and Frodo's failure. The ring grows stronger as it approaches Mordor. The ring grows stronger as it approaches Mount Doom. The ring grows stronger as it approaches the crack of doom, the place of its making, the source of its power, the fire in which Sauron's will was first bound to gold. The escalation is gradual. In the Shire, the ring is manageable. In Bree, the ring is tempting. At Weathertop, the ring is dangerous. In Moria, the ring is heavy. In Lothlorien, the ring is seductive. At Amon Hen, the ring is commanding. In Mordor, the ring is overwhelming. The escalation means that Frodo's task is not a static challenge, not a fixed weight that must be carried from point A to point B. Frodo's task is a challenge that gets harder with every step. The closer Frodo gets to the goal, the more powerful the ring becomes. The more powerful the ring becomes, the harder it is to resist. The harder it is to resist, the more of Frodo's will is consumed by the resistance. The more of his energy, his identity, his selfhood is devoured by the constant, escalating, never-ending effort of not giving in. Think of it as climbing a mountain that grows steeper with every step. A mountain whose gradient increases as you ascend, whose angle tilts closer to vertical the higher you climb, whose summit recedes as you approach it. The effort that carried you the first mile is insufficient for the second. The strength that sustained you through the foothills is inadequate for the peaks. And the summit, the Crack of Doom, is not merely steep. The summit is vertical. The summit is a wall of resistance so sheer that no mortal climber, no matter how determined, can scale it through effort alone. By the time Frodo reaches the Crack of Doom, the ring is at the absolute peak of its power. The ring is in the place where it was made. The ring is surrounded by the fire that gave it life. The ring is closer to its source than it has been since Sauron placed it on his finger 3,000 years ago. And the ring's will, the fragment of Sauron's will that lives within the gold, is screaming. The ring is fighting for its life with everything it has. And Frodo is depleted. Frodo has been resisting the ring for months, for years. If you count the time between Bilbo's departure and the beginning of the quest. Frodo's will has been eroded. Frodo's strength has been sapped. Frodo's identity has been worn down by the constant, grinding, daily struggle to maintain himself against a force that never sleeps, never rests, never relents. The contest at the Crack of Doom is not a fair fight. It is not a test of Frodo's moral character. It is the collision between a hobbit's exhausted will and a god's concentrated malice at the point of the god's maximum power. The outcome is predetermined. No one could have passed that test. No one. Part 4. Tolkien's own words. I am not speculating. I am not interpreting. I am telling you what Tolkien himself said in a letter written in 1963, Letter 246. One of the most important documents for understanding The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien addressed the question of Frodo's failure at the Crack of Doom directly and unambiguously. Tolkien wrote that the quest, as he conceived it, was designed to be one in which the final act of destruction could not be achieved by an act of will. The power of the ring at the place of its making was too great for anyone to resist. Not just for Frodo, for anyone. For Gandalf, for Galadriel, for Aragorn, for any being in Middle-earth, mortal or immortal. The ring at the Crack of Doom was irresistible. Tolkien was explicit. Frodo had done everything that was within his power to do. Frodo had carried the ring to the place of its destruction. Frodo had resisted the ring's corruption longer and more successfully than any other being could have done. Frodo had accomplished the impossible, had brought the ring to the one place in the world where it could be destroyed. But the final act, the act of dropping the ring into the fire, was beyond the capacity of any will in Middle-earth. The ring, at the Crack of Doom, could not be voluntarily destroyed. The ring's power, in that place, was absolute. No being who held the ring at the edge of the fire could choose to let it go. This is not a narrative convenience. This is not a plot device designed to create last-minute tension. This is the theological foundation of the entire story. The destruction of the ring cannot be accomplished by willpower alone, And the reason it cannot be accomplished by willpower alone is the most important thing that Tolkien has to say about the nature of good and evil. Part 5. The Theological Framework. Tolkien was a devout Catholic. His faith was not incidental to his writing. It was the foundation of his writing, the invisible architecture that supports every story he tells, the grammar of the mythology that most readers feel without recognizing. The Lord of the Rings is not an allegory. Tolkien was emphatic about this. He rejected allegory as a literary mode and insisted that his story was not a coded retelling of any historical or religious narrative. But The Lord of the Rings is, in Tolkien's own words, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. A story that embodies Catholic theology not through allegorical correspondence, but through the deep structure of its moral and spiritual vision. The theological principle that governs the climax of The Lord of the Rings is this: evil cannot be defeated by human effort alone. The darkness is too strong. The corruption is too deep. The ring, the embodiment of the will to dominate, the externalist desire for power over others, cannot be overcome by an act of will, because the very act of willing is the thing that the ring corrupts. Think about what it would mean to will the destruction of the ring. It would mean standing at the crack of doom, holding an object of infinite power, and choosing to destroy it, choosing to give up the power, choosing to relinquish the mastery, choosing to throw away the one thing in the world that could give you everything you ever wanted. The act of destruction would require an exercise of will so powerful that it would itself become an act of mastery, an assertion of dominance over the ring that would, in the very act of asserting itself, become the thing that the ring feeds on. The paradox is precise. The ring can only be destroyed by someone who is willing to destroy it. But the willingness to destroy the ring requires a strength of will that the ring would corrupt before the act could be completed. The stronger your will, the more the ring can work with. The weaker your will, the less likely you are to resist the ring's final temptation. There is no sweet spot. There is no balance point. There is no mortal being who possesses exactly the right combination of strength and humility to voluntarily cast the ring into the fire. The destruction of the ring requires something that no mortal effort can provide. The destruction of the ring requires grace. Part 6. What grace means. Grace, in the theological sense that Tolkien employs, is unearned divine assistance, help that comes from outside the system, help that is not produced by the efforts of the characters, but that arrives at the moment of greatest need, transforming failure into success, disaster into salvation. Grace is not magic. Grace is not Deus ex machina. Grace is not God reaching down and solving the problem, because the characters couldn't solve it themselves. Grace is the principle that the universe is structured in such a way that good actions produce good consequences, not always immediately, not always visibly, not always in the way that the actor intended, but ultimately, inevitably, in ways that the actor could not have predicted or controlled. In The Lord of the Rings, grace operates through mercy. Frodo shows mercy to Gollum. This is the pivotal act of the entire story. More important than any battle. More important than any sword stroke. More important than any strategic decision made by any king or wizard or general. Frodo shows mercy to Gollum. Frodo chooses not to kill the creature who has been following him, scheming against him, waiting for the moment to steal the ring back. Frodo chooses compassion over pragmatism, pity over self-interest, mercy over justice. And that mercy saves the world. Gollum, the creature whom Frodo spared, takes the ring from Frodo's finger at the crack of doom. Gollum bites off Frodo's finger. Gollum dances with joy on the edge of the precipice. And Gollum falls, falls into the fire, carrying the ring to its destruction. The destruction of the ring is not accomplished by Frodo's will. The destruction of the ring is accomplished through Frodo's mercy, through the choice to spare Gollum, the choice made months earlier. The choice that seemed foolish at the time. The choice that set in motion a chain of events that no one, not Frodo, not Gandalf, not Sauron, not anyone, could have predicted or controlled. This is grace. This is the unearned, unpredictable, uncontrollable intervention of a moral order that rewards mercy with salvation. Frodo's mercy toward Gollum is the mechanism through which the ring is destroyed. Not because Frodo planned it, not because Frodo calculated the odds, but because mercy, in Tolkien's theology, is the force that operates when all other forces have been exhausted. Part 7. The burden of carrying. Let me tell the story of what the ring does to Frodo, because the story of the corruption is as important as the story of the destruction, and most fans underestimate the severity of what Frodo endures. Frodo receives the ring from Bilbo at the farewell party in September of 3001 of the Third Age. For 17 years, Frodo possesses the ring without knowing what it is. The ring sits in a drawer or on a chain, inert, unrecognized, apparently harmless. Frodo uses it occasionally, to disappear from boring relatives, to slip away from unwanted visitors, without understanding the weight of the object he carries. During those 17 years, the ring is working on Frodo. Not aggressively, not with the direct, overwhelming pressure that it will later exert, but subtly, gently, almost imperceptibly, the ring is establishing a connection. The ring is learning Frodo's mind. The ring is identifying Frodo's desires, Frodo's fears, Frodo's weaknesses. The ring is making itself at home. The ring is also keeping Frodo young. This is a detail that fans often miss. Frodo, like Bilbo, does not age normally while in possession of the ring. By the time of the quest, Frodo is 50 years old, but he looks and feels much younger than 50. The ring's preservation is already at work, already exerting its influence on Frodo's body, already beginning the process of stretching and thinning that Bilbo described so memorably. Frodo does not notice the preservation because Frodo does not know what the ring is doing. The ring works in secret. The ring works in silence. The ring works without the bearer's knowledge or consent. When Gandalf reveals the truth, when Gandalf tells Frodo that the ring is Sauron's ring, the One Ring, the master of all the rings of power, Frodo's relationship with the ring changes immediately. The knowledge transforms the ring from an heirloom into a horror. Frodo wants to get rid of it. Frodo offers it to Gandalf. Frodo wants nothing to do with the ring, wants it gone, wants it out of his life, wants it to be someone else's problem. But the ring does not want to leave. The ring has been with Frodo for 17 years. The ring has made its connection. The ring has identified Frodo as its bearer, not its master, but its vehicle. The hobbit who will carry it to wherever the ring decides it needs to go. Frodo's journey from the Shire to Mount Doom is a journey of approximately 6 months, from late September 3018 to late March 3019. 6 months of carrying. 6 months of the ring's weight on his neck and on his mind. 6 months of escalating pressure, escalating temptation, escalating corruption. The corruption is not constant. The corruption has stages. And the stages map precisely to the geography of the journey, because the ring's power grows as it moves closer to Mordor, to Sauron, to the place of its making. Part 8, Stage 1. The Shire to Rivendell. In the first stage of the journey, the ring's corruption is mainly protective. The ring wants to protect itself, wants to keep Frodo alive long enough to be useful. At the Prancing Pony in Bree, the ring acts. When Frodo is about to be noticed, When the attention of the crowd threatens to create a scene, the ring slips onto Frodo's finger. The ring makes Frodo invisible. The act seems accidental, but it is not accidental. The ring does not do anything by accident. The ring slips onto Frodo's finger because the ring wants to be worn, because every moment on a finger is a moment of connection, a moment of influence, a moment in which the ring's hold on the bearer deepens. At Weathertop, the ring's influence becomes lethal. The Nazgul close in. The ring calls to them. The servants of the ring can sense the ring, can feel its presence, can track it through the world. The ring is not hiding from the Nazgul. The ring is calling to them. The ring wants to be found, wants to be taken, wants to be returned to Sauron. And at Weathertop, Frodo puts the ring on. The temptation overwhelms him. The Nazgul close in, 5 of them, black-robed, faceless, emanating a terror that freezes the blood and paralyzes the will. Frodo slips the ring onto his finger in a moment of desperate, unthinking panic. And the moment the ring is on his finger, Frodo enters the unseen world, the shadow world where the Nazgul exist. The twilight realm between life and death, between the physical world and the spiritual void. In the unseen world, Frodo can see the Nazgul clearly. The Nazgul are not black-robed shadows in the unseen world. The Nazgul are white-robed kings, tall, terrible, ancient, wearing the remnants of the power and the majesty that they once possessed as the lords of men. The Witch King is the tallest, the most terrible, his crown visible, his eyes burning with a cold fire that has been lit for 3,000 years. The Witch King stabs Frodo with a Morgul blade, a weapon designed not to kill but to transform, to turn the victim into a wraith, to drag the victim into the shadow world where the Nazgul exist permanently. The wound is not merely physical, the wound is spiritual, a crack in Frodo's soul through which the ring's influence can pour with greater force and greater directness than ever before. The Morgul wound is critical to understanding why Frodo cannot destroy the ring. The wound never fully heals. A fragment of the blade remains in Frodo's shoulder, working its way inward, slowly, constantly, moving toward the heart. Elrond removes the fragment in Rivendell, but the wound itself persists. The wound is a permanent vulnerability, an opening through which the ring's corruption can operate with greater efficiency, greater directness, greater force than it could through the unbroken defenses of a healthy mind. Frodo carries the wound for the rest of the quest. The wound aches on the anniversary of the attack. The wound makes Frodo more susceptible to the ring's influence, more tired, more anxious, more prone to the dark thoughts and the paranoid suspicions that the ring cultivates in its bearers. The wound is the ring's inside agent, the damage that the ring's world has already done, the breach in Frodo's defenses that can never be fully repaired. Part 9. Stage 2. Rivendell to Amon Hen. The second stage of the journey begins with the formation of the Fellowship, and during this stage, the ring's strategy shifts. In the Shire, the ring worked alone. From Rivendell onward, the ring works through others. The ring reaches out to the members of the Fellowship. The ring finds vulnerabilities. The ring identifies desires. The ring whispers, not in words, not in audible suggestions, but in feelings, in urges, in the subtle pressure of a thought that seems to come from within, but that originates from the gold circle on a chain around Frodo's neck. Boromir is the ring's primary target. Boromir's desire is the clearest, the most urgent, the most exploitable. Boromir wants to save his city. Boromir wants to defend Gondor. Boromir wants a weapon, a tool of power that can turn the tide against Mordor. that can give Gondor the strength to resist the darkness that threatens to overwhelm it. The ring feeds on this desire. The ring amplifies it. The ring transforms Boromir's patriotism into obsession, slowly, over the course of weeks, turning the noble warrior into a man who cannot think of anything except the ring, who cannot look at Frodo without seeing the instrument of his city's salvation hanging around the hobbit's neck. Boromir's fall at Amon Hen is the ring's work. Boromir does not turn evil. Boromir is driven mad, driven by a desire that has been amplified beyond the point of reason, inflated beyond the point of self-control, magnified until it consumes every other consideration. Boromir attacks Frodo not because Boromir is a bad man, but because the ring has made Boromir's best quality, his devotion to his people, into a weapon against his own integrity. And the tragedy deepens when you realize that Boromir recognizes what has happened. After Frodo flees, after the ring's grip loosens, Boromir collapses. Boromir weeps. Boromir understands, too late, too painfully, that the ring used him, that the desire that drove him to attack Frodo was not his own desire, but the ring's desire wearing his face. Boromir's remorse is genuine, devastating, total, and Boromir's redemption, his last stand against the Uruk-hai, his death defending Merry and Pippin, his confession to Aragorn, is the redemption of a man who knows exactly how he was corrupted, and who spends his final moments trying to undo the damage. The ring used Boromir. And then the ring discarded him, moved on to the next target, the next vulnerability, the next desire that could be exploited. The ring is not loyal to its instruments. The ring uses them and throws them away. Frodo recognizes what is happening. At Amon Hen, Frodo sees the ring's strategy clearly, sees that the ring is working through the Fellowship, turning its members against each other, using their love and their loyalty and their fear as tools of corruption. And Frodo makes a decision. He leaves. He breaks the Fellowship. He takes the ring and goes to Mordor alone except for Sam, who refuses to be left behind. The decision is an act of extraordinary courage and extraordinary sacrifice. Frodo gives up the protection of the Fellowship, the strength of Aragorn, the wisdom of Gandalf, the loyalty of the hobbits, in order to protect the Fellowship from the ring. Frodo chooses isolation in order to prevent the ring from using his companions as instruments of its own recovery. Part 10. Stage 3. The Dead Marshes and Ithilien. The third stage of the journey is where the ring's corruption of Frodo begins to become visible. Visible to Sam, visible to the reader, visible in the way Frodo speaks, the way Frodo moves, the way Frodo relates to the world around him. In the Dead Marshes, Frodo is drawn to the dead faces beneath the water. The ring pulls him toward them, toward the ghostly lights, toward the pale forms of elves and men and orcs who died in the Battle of the Last Alliance, and who now lie preserved in the mire, staring upward with open eyes. Frodo is fascinated. Frodo is drawn. The ring is showing Frodo the world through its own eyes, showing him the dead, the fallen, the defeated, the victims of the wars that the ring has caused. The Dead Marshes scene is a signal. The ring is beginning to change the way Frodo perceives reality. The ring is beginning to draw Frodo into its world. The world of shadows. The world of the unseen. The world where the Nazgul exist and where the wraiths wander. The Morgul wound is part of this, the wound that has never healed. The wound that makes Frodo more susceptible to the shadow world. The wound that is slowly, imperceptibly, pulling Frodo toward the state of wraithhood that the Nazgul occupy. In Ithilien, Frodo meets Faramir, and the meeting reveals how much the ring has already changed him. Faramir is Boromir's brother. Faramir knows about the ring. The ring reaches out to Faramir the way it reached out to Boromir, offering power, offering the salvation of Gondor, offering the chance to succeed where Boromir failed. And Faramir refuses. Faramir, in one of the great moments of character in the entire mythology, declares that he would not pick up the ring if he found it lying on the road. Faramir's refusal is not strength in the conventional sense. Faramir is not overpowering the ring's temptation through sheer willpower. Faramir's refusal is wisdom, the wisdom of a man who understands the nature of the temptation and who chooses not to engage with it, who walks away before the ring can find the hook in his soul. Frodo watches Faramir refuse the ring. And Frodo, who has been carrying the ring for months, who is already deep in the ring's grip, who is already losing pieces of himself to the ring's influence, watches the refusal with something that might be relief, and something that might be resentment. The resentment is the ring's. The ring does not like to be refused. The ring does not like to see its power rejected. And Frodo, carrying the ring, carries the ring's wounded pride along with everything else. Part 11. Stage 4. Cirith Ungol and Shelob. The fourth stage of the journey is the darkest, and it is here that the ring's corruption of Frodo reaches a critical threshold. Gollum has been guiding Frodo and Sam through Mordor's borderlands. Gollum has been scheming, planning to lead Frodo into Shelob's lair, where the great spider will kill Frodo and Gollum can take the ring from the body. The plan is Gollum's, but the ring is complicit. The ring does not stop Gollum. The ring does not warn Frodo. The ring allows Gollum's treachery because the ring is playing its own game, a game that uses Gollum as a piece, a game that has been running since the ring first slipped from Sauron's hand. The ascent of the stairs of Cirith Ungol is where Frodo's deterioration becomes unmistakable. Frodo is exhausted. Physically, mentally, spiritually, the ring is heavy. Not metaphorically heavy, physically heavy. The ring grows heavier as it approaches Mount Doom, as if the gold itself is resisting, as if the ring is trying to drag Frodo to the ground, to stop the journey, to prevent itself from being carried to the one place in the world where it can be destroyed. The stairs are terrible, a winding, vertiginous, seemingly endless climb carved into the rock face of the Mountains of Shadow. The winding stair and the straight stair, one after the other, hundreds and hundreds of steps ascending into darkness. Frodo climbs because he must. Frodo climbs because the mission demands it. Frodo climbs because the alternative, stopping, giving up, surrendering the ring, is unthinkable, even though the climbing itself has become almost unthinkable. And then Shelob, the great spider, the last child of Ungoliant, a creature of malice and hunger that has squatted in her tunnels since the Second Age, feeding on whatever Gollum brings her, growing fat on orc flesh and the flesh of unluckier travellers. Shelob stings Frodo with her venom. Frodo falls. For a terrible, heart-stopping interval, Sam believes that Frodo is dead, that the quest has ended, that the ring-bearer has been killed by a spider in a tunnel, that the story is over. Sam takes the ring. Sam puts it around his own neck. Sam prepares to continue the quest alone, to carry the ring to Mount Doom by himself, the gardener completing Master's task. And Sam discovers what carrying the ring means. Sam feels the weight. Sam feels the temptation. Sam glimpses what Frodo has been enduring for months, the pressure, the whisper, the constant, grinding, exhausting effort of not surrendering to the ring's will. But Frodo is not dead. Frodo is paralyzed, frozen by Shelob's venom, alive but immobile, conscious but helpless. And Sam returns the ring to Frodo. When Frodo awakens, the return is an act of love. Sam gives back the burden that Sam could have kept, returns the weight that Sam could have carried, restores to Frodo the object that is slowly killing him, because the object is Frodo's burden, and Sam's love demands that the burden remain where it belongs. Sam notices the change when the ring returns to Frodo. Sam sees Frodo clutching at the ring with desperate fingers, sees Frodo's eyes going blank and distant in moments of ring-induced trance. Sam offers to carry the ring. The offer is pure, born of love, born of loyalty, born of the simple, generous desire to help his friend. Frodo's reaction is terrifying. Frodo rounds on Sam with a snarl, protective, possessive, savage, for a moment. Sam does not see Frodo. Sam sees someone else, sees a figure crouching over the ring with wild eyes, clutching it to his chest, hissing at anyone who approaches. Sam sees Gollum. The resemblance is deliberate on Tolkien's part. The ring is turning Frodo into Gollum, turning the generous, compassionate, gentle hobbit into a possessive, paranoid, ring-obsessed wretch. The transformation is heartbreaking because Frodo recognizes it. Frodo sees Sam's face, sees the fear, the hurt, the confusion, and Frodo comes back to himself. Frodo apologizes. Frodo knows what is happening to him. Frodo knows that the ring is consuming him. But knowing does not stop the consumption. Awareness does not prevent the corruption. The ring does not care whether Frodo understands what is happening. The ring cares only that the process continues. Part 12. The weight. Let me talk about the weight, because the physical weight of the ring is one of Tolkien's most subtle and most devastating details. The ring is a small gold band. It weighs, physically, almost nothing. A few grams of gold. A featherweight. An ornament that could sit on a finger without being felt. But the ring's weight is not physical. The ring's weight is spiritual, the accumulated pressure of Sauron's will, concentrated and focused and directed entirely at the ring's bearer. The weight is the weight of another being's consciousness pressing against your own. The weight of a dark intelligence leaning on your mind, pushing against your thoughts, crushing your identity beneath the mass of its malice. And the weight grows. In the Shire, the ring is as light as a ring of gold. In Mordor, the ring is an anchor, a millstone around Frodo's neck, dragging him down, bowing his back, forcing him to crawl. The weight is not imagination. The weight is real as gravity, as real as the stone beneath Frodo's feet, as real as the fire in the mountain toward which Frodo is crawling. The weight is the ring's resistance. The ring does not want to be destroyed. The ring is fighting with the only weapon it has, which is the weight of Sauron's will concentrated in a circle of gold. The ring is trying to make itself impossible to carry, trying to break Frodo's body the way it is breaking Frodo's mind, trying to stop the journey through sheer physical exhaustion if the mental corruption cannot work fast enough. Sam carries Frodo. On the slopes of Mount Doom, when Frodo can no longer walk, Sam lifts him, puts Frodo on his back, and climbs. "I can't carry it for you," Sam says, speaking of the ring. "But I can carry you." The moment is one of the most famous in the entire story, one of the most quoted, most loved, most remembered scenes in The Lord of the Rings. But notice what Sam says. Sam cannot carry the ring. Not because Sam lacks the physical strength. Sam briefly carries the ring in the Tower of Cirith Ungol and manages it better than anyone else in the story, except perhaps Tom Bombadil. Sam cannot carry the ring because the ring is Frodo's burden, because the connection between Frodo and the ring has become so deep, so intimate, so fused, that removing the ring from Frodo would not relieve the burden, but would simply transfer the conduit of corruption from one hobbit to another. Sam carries Frodo because Sam understands instinctively, without theological training, without deep knowledge of the nature of evil, that the ring's burden is inseparable from the ring's bearer. The only way to help Frodo is to help Frodo. The burden cannot be shared. The corruption cannot be distributed. The weight falls on one person, and the only thing that another person can do is carry the person who carries the weight. Part 13. What the ring offers Frodo. The ring tempts each bearer differently. The ring finds what you love and offers it back to you in corrupted form. So what does the ring offer Frodo? This is a question that Tolkien handles with remarkable subtlety, because Frodo's desires are not the grand, ambitious, world-shaping desires that the ring typically exploits. Frodo does not want power. Frodo does not want kingdoms. Frodo does not want glory or dominion or the subjugation of his enemies. Frodo wants peace. Frodo wants the Shire. Frodo wants the simple, ordinary, comfortable life that he lived before the ring entered his world. The life of books and walks and meals and friends. The life of a gentle hobbit in a green country. The life that was taken from him when Gandalf spoke the words that changed everything. The ring offers Frodo all of this. The ring whispers, "Keep me, and all the pain will stop. Keep me, and the journey will be over. Keep me, and you can go home. Keep me, and the Shire will be safe, safe forever. Protected by the power that you carry, guarded by the authority that the ring would give you." The temptation is exquisitely cruel because it targets Frodo's most innocent desire. The desire for home, the desire for peace, the desire for the quiet life that is the hobbit's defining characteristic. The ring does not tempt Frodo with evil. The ring tempts Frodo with goodness, with the very goodness that makes Frodo who he is. The love of the Shire and the love of ordinary life, and the deep, aching desire for the journey to be over and the suffering to end. But there is another layer. As the journey continues, as the ring's grip tightens, the ring offers Frodo something darker. Something that is not a perversion of Frodo's desire, but a creation of the ring itself. The ring offers Frodo ownership. The ring teaches Frodo to think of the ring as mine, not as a burden, not as a responsibility, not as a duty, not as a terrible weight that must be carried and then destroyed. Mine, my ring, my precious. The language of possession, the language that Gollum uses, the language that Bilbo used in his worst moments, the language that replaces the bearer's identity with the ring's identity until there is no difference between the person and the object. By the time Frodo reaches the crack of doom, the ring has taught him this language thoroughly. The ring is no longer something Frodo carries. The ring is something Frodo owns. The ring is Frodo's, and asking Frodo to destroy it is no longer asking him to complete a mission. It is asking him to amputate a part of himself. Part 14. The Crack of Doom. Let me take you to the moment. Frodo and Sam have climbed the mountain. Gollum has attacked them on the slopes, a last desperate attempt to take the ring by force, and Sam has driven Gollum back. Frodo has crawled the final distance on his hands and knees, dragging the ring up the mountain's side, fighting against its weight, fighting against its will. Fighting against every fibre of his own corrupted mind that screams at him to turn back, to keep the ring, to claim it as his own. Frodo reaches the crack of doom. The fire roars below, not a campfire, not a furnace, but the throat of a volcano. A lake of liquid rock that glows with a light that is not natural light, that is not the light of the sun or the moon, but the light of the earth's own fury. The mountain shakes. The air is thick with heat and ash and the choking fumes of Orodruin. Frodo stands at the edge of the precipice, a small figure, utterly alone, at the end of the longest and most terrible journey in the history of Middle-earth. Sam is behind him. Sam has carried Frodo up the mountain. Sam has fought Gollum on the slopes. Sam has done everything that loyalty and love and sheer hobbit stubbornness can do. But Sam cannot follow Frodo to the edge. Sam cannot stand where Frodo stands. The last steps of Frodo's alone, the final approach to the fire, the final confrontation with the ring, the final moment in which a hobbit's will is tested against a god's. And Frodo speaks, "I have come," he says. "But I do not choose to do what I came to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine." The words are devastating. I do not choose to do what I came to do. Not I cannot. I do not choose. The language is the language of will, of active, deliberate, conscious choice. Frodo is not claiming that the ring overpowered him. Frodo is claiming the ring as his own. Frodo is asserting ownership. Frodo is declaring, at the culmination of the quest, that the ring belongs to him and that he will not give it up. The moment is the ring's triumph. The ring has accomplished what it set out to accomplish, has turned the bearer into a claimant, has transformed the instrument of its destruction into the instrument of its preservation. The ring has won. By every measure of willpower, of moral strength, of individual effort, the ring has won. And this is the point. This is Tolkien's point. The ring was always going to win this battle. The ring was designed to win this battle. The ring, at the place of its making, at the peak of its power, in the grip of a bearer who has been carrying it for months and who has been connected to it for years, cannot be voluntarily relinquished. The will to destroy the ring is the will to dominate the ring, and the will to dominate is the ring's food. Part 15. Gollum's role. And then Gollum appears. Gollum, who has been following Frodo and Sam through Mordor, who was driven off on the slopes of the mountain, who has been consumed by his own ring madness for 500 years, attacks Frodo at the crack of doom. Gollum bites off Frodo's finger, the finger that wears the ring. Gollum seizes the ring. Gollum holds it up, cackling, dancing with joy on the edge of the precipice. Precious. Gollum cries, "My precious." And Gollum falls. Whether Gollum stumbles, whether Gollum is pushed, whether the rock simply gives way beneath him, the text leaves the mechanism ambiguous. But the result is clear. Gollum falls into the fire, carrying the ring, and the ring is destroyed. The moment is extraordinary in its economy. Centuries of history, 3,000 years of war, of suffering, of the ring's malice spreading through the world, end in a single, clumsy, almost anticlimactic instant. A creature falls off a ledge, a ring drops into fire, a Dark Lord's power collapses. The entire architecture of evil that has defined the Third Age is dissolved in the time it takes for a small body to fall a few dozen feet into a lake of magma. The anticlimax is the point. The destruction of the ring is not heroic. The destruction of the ring is not glorious. The destruction of the ring is messy, accidental, almost comical. A ring-obsessed wretch dancing with joy on the edge of a cliff and losing his balance. The greatest moment of salvation in the entire mythology looks, from the outside, like a slapstick mishap, and the gap between the appearance and the significance is Tolkien's deliberate artistic choice. A choice that says this is what grace looks like. Not glorious, not dramatic, not the triumphant conclusion of a hero's journey. Grace looks like an accident. Grace looks like a stumble. Grace looks like something that happened because of a series of choices that no one could have planned and that no one could have predicted. The destruction of the ring is accomplished by the creature whom everyone despised, the creature whom Gandalf pitied, whom Bilbo spared, whom Frodo protected, whom Sam wanted to kill. The destruction of the ring is accomplished by the most wretched, most corrupted, most pitiable being in the entire story. a being who has been enslaved by the ring for 5 centuries, who has been twisted into a crawling, hissing, fish-eating wreck of his former self, who has lost everything that once made him a person. Gollum is the instrument of grace. Gollum is the mechanism through which mercy produces salvation. Gollum is the proof that no one is beyond redemption, not because Gollum is redeemed, but because Gollum's existence, his survival, his continued presence in the story is the direct result of acts of mercy that other characters chose. If Bilbo had killed Gollum in the Goblin tunnels, the ring could not have been destroyed. If Gandalf had hunted Gollum down and executed him, the ring could not have been destroyed. If Frodo had allowed Sam to kill Gollum on the slopes of Emyn Muil, the ring could not have been destroyed. If Faramir had executed Gollum at the Forbidden Pool, the ring could not have been destroyed. Every act of mercy toward Gollum is a link in the chain that leads to the ring's destruction. The chain is invisible. The chain is unplanned. The chain is the work of grace, the divine principle that rewards mercy with outcomes that the merciful could never have anticipated. Part 16. The Eucatastrophe. Tolkien invented a word for what happens at the crack of doom. He called it eucatastrophe, the sudden, joyous turn at the moment of greatest darkness. The reversal that transforms despair into hope, defeat into victory, catastrophe into salvation. Eucatastrophe is Tolkien's term for grace in action. Eucatastrophe is the moment when the story seems lost, when the hero has failed, when the enemy has won, when every human effort has been exhausted and every mortal resource has been depleted. And something happens. Something unexpected. Something unearned. Something that comes from outside the closed system of human effort and human failure and transforms the outcome in a way that no one could have predicted. The eucatastrophe at the crack of doom is the eucatastrophe of the entire mythology. The moment toward which the entire story has been building. The moment that justifies every act of mercy, every gesture of compassion, every seemingly foolish decision to spare a life that could have been taken. But the eucatastrophe only works because of what came before. The eucatastrophe only works because Frodo carried the ring to Mount Doom. The eucatastrophe only works because Frodo resisted the ring long enough and hard enough to bring it to the one place where it could be destroyed. The eucatastrophe only works because Frodo showed mercy to Gollum, showed mercy when mercy seemed foolish, showed compassion when pragmatism demanded violence, chose pity when self-interest demanded cruelty. The eucatastrophe is not a reward for effort. The eucatastrophe is a response to mercy. The eucatastrophe does not happen because Frodo tried hard enough. The eucatastrophe happens because Frodo was merciful enough. Because Frodo chose, at moments of great personal danger, to extend compassion to a creature that no one else would have spared. This is Tolkien's deepest moral insight. The world is saved not by the strongest or the wisest or the most powerful, but by the most merciful. The darkness is defeated not by an act of will, but by an act of grace. Grace that was set in motion by mercy. Mercy that was extended toward the least deserving. Mercy that produced consequences that the merciful could never have foreseen. Part 17. Why a Hobbit? This brings us to one of the great questions of the story, a question that Tolkien addresses repeatedly and that most fans answer too simply. Why does the quest fall to a hobbit? Why not to Gandalf, who is wiser? Why not to Aragorn, who is stronger? Why not to Galadriel, who is more powerful? Why not to any of the mighty figures who populate the Lord of the Rings, beings of enormous power, enormous wisdom, enormous experience? The answer is built into the theology. The ring corrupts through desire. The ring finds what you want and uses it against you. The ring is most dangerous to those who have the most to gain from its power, to the powerful, to the ambitious, to those who already possess the desire to shape the world according to their own vision. Hobbits want very little. Hobbits want food, comfort, gardens, parties, pipeweed, and the quiet enjoyment of a peaceful life. Hobbits do not want power. Hobbits do not want domination. Hobbits do not want to reshape the world. They want the world to leave them alone so they can eat second breakfast in peace. The ring has very little material to work with in a hobbit. The ring can try. The ring can amplify the hobbit's desire for comfort, for safety, for the return of the peaceful life. But the amplification of "I want to sit in my garden and eat mushrooms" does not produce the same result as the amplification of "I want to save my kingdom," or "I want to defeat the enemy," or "I want to preserve the beauty of the world forever." The hobbit's desires, even when amplified to obsessive levels, do not produce the kind of world-shaping ambition that the ring needs in order to operate at full power. This is why Gandalf recommends Frodo. This is why the Council of Elrond assigns the quest to a hobbit. Not because hobbits are strong, because hobbits are small. Not because hobbits are wise, because hobbits are humble. Not because hobbits can resist the ring, because hobbits give the ring less to corrupt. The choice of Frodo is itself an act of humility, an acknowledgement by the wise and the powerful that the problem cannot be solved by wisdom and power. The ring is a problem that gets worse the more power you throw at it. The ring is a problem that deepens the more wisdom you apply to it. The only solution is to give the ring to someone who has no power and no ambition and no desire for mastery. Someone who will carry the ring not because they want to use it, but because no one else can carry it with less risk. Frodo is chosen because Frodo is unsuitable. And the unsuitability is the qualification. Part 18. Bilbo's Shadow. Frodo's experience with the ring has a precedent, and the precedent is instructive. Bilbo carried the ring for 60 years. 60 years. Far longer than Frodo. Far longer than anyone except Gollum. Bilbo found the ring in the goblin tunnels under the Misty Mountains in the year 2941 of the Third Age and carried it until the farewell party in 3001. 60 years of possession. 60 years of connection. 60 years of the ring's slow, patient, imperceptible work. And Bilbo was corrupted. Not dramatically, not in the way that Gollum was corrupted, not with the visible, physical, soul-destroying degradation that 500 years of ring possession produced. Bilbo was corrupted subtly. Bilbo was corrupted in small ways, ways that were easy to miss, easy to excuse, easy to attribute to age or eccentricity, rather than to the influence of a dark artifact. Bilbo stopped aging. For 60 years, Bilbo did not grow old, did not wrinkle, did not weaken, did not show the normal signs of hobbit aging. Bilbo felt thin, his own word, a word that captures the ring's effect on its bearer with disturbing precision. Bilbo felt stretched, as if too little of himself was being spread over too much reality, as if the ring was consuming his substance while preserving his appearance. And Bilbo became possessive. At the farewell party, when the moment came to give up the ring, Bilbo resisted. Bilbo called the ring my precious, Gollum's word, the ring bearer's word, the word that signals the transition from carrying to claiming. Bilbo needed Gandalf's intervention, needed the wizard's stern, frightening, almost threatening insistence to let the ring go. Bilbo managed it. Bilbo relinquished the ring. Bilbo became, as far as we know, the first and only being in the history of Middle-earth to voluntarily give up the ring. The achievement is remarkable, a testament to Bilbo's fundamental goodness, to the hobbit nature's resistance to corruption, to the 60 years of carrying that never quite tipped over into claiming. But notice the conditions. Bilbo gave up the ring in the Shire, far from Mordor, far from the ring's source of power, in the place where the ring's influence was at its weakest. Bilbo gave up the ring with Gandalf standing over him, with the wizard's will pressing against the ring's will, providing external support for Bilbo's internal struggle. Bilbo gave up the ring after 60 years of relatively mild corruption. Years in which the ring was dormant, waiting, patient, not exerting its full power because its master had not yet returned. Frodo faces none of these advantages. Frodo is at the crack of doom, the place where the ring is strongest. Frodo is alone, no Gandalf to strengthen his will, no external support to lean against. Frodo has been carrying the ring under conditions of extreme, escalating, relentless pressure. Conditions that make Bilbo's 60 years of comfortable carrying look like a holiday. The comparison tells us what we need to know. If Bilbo, who carried the ring under ideal conditions, with minimal pressure, far from the ring's source of power, nearly failed to give it up, then Frodo, who carried the ring under the worst possible conditions, with maximum pressure, at the ring's source of power, never had a chance. Part 19. Gollum's 500 years. If Bilbo's 60 years show what the ring does under mild conditions, then Gollum's 500 years show what the ring does when no resistance is offered. Gollum, originally Sméagol, a hobbit-like creature of the river folk, obtained the ring through murder. Sméagol killed his cousin Daegol to take the ring on the very day it was found. The acquisition through violence matters, because the ring's first act in Gollum's hands was to reward violence, to reinforce the idea that the ring belongs to the one who seizes it, to establish from the very beginning the principle that the ring is taken, not given. 500 years of possession turns Sméagol into Gollum. The transformation is total. The ring extends Gollum's life far beyond its natural span, but the extension is not a gift. The extension is a prison. Gollum lives for centuries in a cave beneath the misty mountains, eating raw fish, talking to himself, slowly losing every trace of the person he once was. The ring preserves Gollum's body while consuming his mind, keeps the flesh alive while devouring the soul, stretches the lifespan while shrinking the self. The transformation is physical as well as spiritual. Gollum's body changes, becomes elongated, pallid, adapted to the darkness of the cave. His eyes grow large and luminous, adjusted to the absence of light. His hands become grasping, long-fingered, permanently shaped into the clutching posture of one who holds the ring constantly, obsessively, possessively. His voice splits, becomes two voices, Sméagol and Gollum, arguing with each other in the darkness, the remnant of the person debating with the creation of the ring. The split voice is the most revealing detail. The split tells us that Sméagol is still in there, still present, still conscious, still capable of thought and feeling and desire. The ring has not destroyed Sméagol. The ring has buried Sméagol, has covered him with layers of corruption, has built a new personality on top of the old one, has imprisoned the original person inside a shell of ring, created identity. Sméagol is a prisoner in his own body, watching through his own eyes as Gollum does things that Sméagol would never have done, hearing through his own ears as Gollum says things that Sméagol would never have said. Gollum's degradation is the ring's purest expression. Gollum is what happens when the ring meets no resistance, when the bearer offers no pushback, when the corruption proceeds without interruption, when the ring's will operates on a mind that has no counterforce to oppose it. Gollum is the ring's final product, the endpoint of the corruption process, the being that remains when the ring has consumed everything that made the bearer a person. The comparison between Gollum and Frodo is deliberate and devastating. Tolkien draws the comparison explicitly, through Sam's eyes, through Frodo's own recognition, through the repeated moments in which Frodo sees himself in Gollum and recoils from the mirror. Frodo knows that Gollum is his future. Frodo knows that if the ring is not destroyed, he will become Gollum, will become a crawling, hissing, fish-eating wretch, clutching the ring in a dark cave, talking to himself in two voices, losing everything that makes him Frodo and becoming nothing but the ring's shell. The knowledge is part of the burden. The knowledge that you are slowly becoming the thing you pity most. The knowledge that the ring is turning you into the creature you have shown mercy to, the creature whose suffering moves you to compassion even as the ring uses that compassion against you, is a form of torment that most fans do not fully appreciate. Frodo shows mercy to Gollum, partly because Frodo sees himself in Gollum. Frodo shows mercy because Frodo understands, with a depth that no other character can match, what the ring does to its bearer. Frodo's mercy is not abstract. Frodo's mercy is not philosophical. Frodo's mercy is the mercy of recognition, the mercy of someone who is undergoing the same process, who knows the suffering from the inside, who extends compassion, because compassion is the last thing that separates him from the creature he is becoming. Part 20. Sam's perspective. Sam sees what Frodo cannot see, and Sam's perspective is crucial to understanding why Frodo's failure at the crack of doom is not, in the deepest sense, a failure. Sam watches Frodo change. Sam watches the light go out of Frodo's eyes. Sam watches the weight settle onto Frodo's shoulders, not just the physical weight of the ring, but the spiritual weight, the invisible burden that bows Frodo's back and dims his voice and turns the cheerful, curious, generous hobbit into a shuffling, hollow-eyed figure who speaks in monosyllables and flinches from the sun. Sam does not fully understand what is happening. Sam is not a theologian. Sam is not a lawmaster. Sam is a gardener, a simple, good, practical hobbit who knows how to plant things and grow things and tend things and make them flourish. Sam does not understand the ring's metaphysics. Sam does not understand the theology of grace. Sam does not understand the mechanism of corruption or the paradox of the will. But Sam understands love. And Sam's love for Frodo is the anchor, the fixed point around which the entire quest rotates. When Frodo is tempted, Sam is there. When Frodo wavers, Sam is steady. When Frodo despairs, Sam hopes. When Frodo falls, Sam carries him. Sam is not immune to the ring. Sam's brief time carrying the ring in Cirith Ungol shows that even Sam is susceptible to the ring's temptations, dreaming of a vast garden that fills the world, a Samwise the Great who rules over a kingdom of flowers. But Sam's desires are so humble, so grounded, so fundamentally modest that the ring cannot inflate them into anything dangerous. Sam's role in the quest is the role of loyalty, and loyalty, in Tolkien's moral framework, is one of the highest virtues. Loyalty is the virtue that sustains you when understanding fails, the virtue that keeps you moving when you don't know why, that keeps you fighting when you can't see the purpose, that keeps you serving when the one you serve can no longer serve themselves. Sam carries Frodo up the mountain. Sam fights Gollum on the slopes. Sam drives away the ring's temptation with memories of the Shire, with the taste of strawberries, with the smell of rain on turned earth, with the ordinary domestic. Unglamorous images of home that the ring cannot corrupt because the ring does not understand them. The ring understands power. The ring understands dominion. The ring does not understand strawberries. Part 21. The paradox of strength. The paradox at the heart of Frodo's failure is the paradox that Tolkien explores throughout the entire mythology: strength, in the face of evil is self-defeating. The stronger you are, the more the ring can use you. The more powerful your will, the more material the ring has to corrupt. The greater your capacity for good, the greater the ring's capacity to turn that good into a weapon against you. Gandalf understands this. "Do not tempt me," he cries. Gandalf knows that his enormous spiritual power, his Maiar nature, his deep understanding of the world's structure, his capacity for good on a scale that no mortal can match, makes him the ring's ideal target. Gandalf with the ring would become a Dark Lord. Not because Gandalf is evil, but because Gandalf's power, channeled through the ring, would produce an evil greater than Sauron's own. Galadriel understands this. "I shall not be dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night." She cries when Frodo offers her the ring. Galadriel's vision of herself with the ring is not a vision of evil. It is a vision of beauty, of majesty, of a queen who rules through love rather than fear. But the love would become compulsion. The beauty would become terror. The queen who rules through love would become the tyrant who rules through the corruption of love, and the corruption would be worse than Sauron's because it would wear the face of beauty rather than the face of the shadow. Aragorn understands this. Aragorn, who has spent his entire life in the service of the free peoples, who has the blood of kings in his veins, who has the strength and the will and the legitimacy to wield enormous power, Aragorn will not touch the ring. Aragorn knows that his desire to serve would become a desire to rule, that his love of the free peoples would become a desire to control them, that the king who takes the ring would become the tyrant who enslaves the world. Frodo is chosen for the quest because Frodo is weak. Not weak in character, Frodo is enormously brave, enormously compassionate, enormously resilient, but weak in the specific dimension that the ring exploits. Frodo has no ambition. Frodo has no desire for mastery. Frodo has no grand vision of the world that the ring could inflate into a world-consuming obsession. Frodo's weakness is his qualification. And yet even Frodo's weakness is not enough. Even the humblest hobbit in the Shire, carrying the smallest possible desires, possessing the least corruptible soul in Middle-earth, cannot resist the ring at the place of its making. The ring is not designed to be resisted. The ring is designed to win. The ring, at the crack of doom, wins against everyone, against the strong and the weak, the wise and the simple, the ambitious and the humble. No one can pass the test. Part 22. Was it really failure? I want to challenge the word failure, because the word is misleading, and the misleading is important. Frodo did not fail. Frodo accomplished the task that was given to him. Frodo carried the ring to Mount Doom. Frodo brought the instrument of the world's salvation to the one place in the world where it could be used. Frodo completed the journey. Frodo delivered the ring. The final act, the casting of the ring into the fire, was not part of Frodo's task. Not really. The final act was the act that no mortal could perform. The act that was, by the design of the ring and the theology of the world, beyond the capacity of any will in Middle-earth. The final act required grace. The final act required the intervention of forces beyond Frodo's control. Forces that Frodo set in motion through his mercy. Forces that were the product of Frodo's compassion. Forces that Frodo could not have predicted or planned, but that his goodness made possible. Frodo's failure is the mechanism of grace. Frodo's failure is the condition that allows the eucatastrophe to occur. If Frodo had destroyed the ring through an act of will, if Frodo had stood at the crack of doom and consciously, deliberately, voluntarily thrown the ring into the fire, then the destruction would have been an act of power, an act of mastery, an act of domination over the ring. And an act of domination over the ring is precisely the kind of act that the ring feeds on. The ring cannot be destroyed by an act of domination, because the ring is domination. The ring cannot be defeated by an exercise of will, because the ring is the corruption of will. The ring can only be destroyed by something that is not will, something that is not power, something that is not mastery. The ring can only be destroyed by accident, by chance, by grace. Tolkien is making a theological argument. The argument is that evil cannot be defeated on evil's own terms. You cannot fight domination with domination. You cannot overcome the will to power with a greater will to power. You can only overcome evil by stepping outside the framework of power entirely, by choosing mercy instead of strength, compassion instead of mastery, grace instead of will. Frodo's failure is the greatest success in the entire mythology. Frodo's failure is the moment when human effort reaches its limit and divine grace takes over. Frodo's failure is the proof that the world is governed not by power but by mercy, that the final victory belongs not to the strongest but to the most compassionate, not to those who assert their will but to those who surrender it. Part 23. The Ring's Intelligence. There is a dimension of the ring's behavior at the crack of doom that fans rarely consider. A dimension that makes Frodo's failure even more understandable and even less blameworthy. The ring knows what is happening. The ring is intelligent. The ring is aware. The ring has been conscious throughout the entire journey, aware of where it is, aware of where it is going, aware of the purpose for which it is being carried. The ring knows that it is being taken to Mount Doom. The ring knows that its bearer intends to destroy it. The ring has known this since Rivendell. Since the Council of Elrond, where the plan was discussed openly, where the decision to destroy the ring was made in the presence of the ring itself. The ring heard the discussion. The ring understood the plan. The ring has had months to prepare its defense. And the ring's defense is Frodo. The ring's defense is the bearer, the mind that the ring has been shaping, the will that the ring has been weakening, the identity that the ring has been eroding, step by step, mile by mile, from the Shire to the crack of doom. The ring's defense against destruction is the corruption of the one who would destroy it. The ring does not simply resist at the crack of doom. The ring has been resisting throughout the entire journey, has been working on Frodo from the moment the quest began, has been preparing the bearer for the moment of final corruption, has been laying the groundwork for the claim that Frodo will make at the edge of the fire. The ring is mine. The words do not spring from nowhere. The words are the culmination of months of patient, systematic, invisible work, the final product of a process that began when the ring first touched Frodo's skin, and that has been proceeding, inexorably, inevitably, toward this moment ever since. The ring is in a sense a better strategist than anyone on the side of the good. The ring sees the plan. The ring understands the plan. The ring prepares a counterplan. And the ring's counterplan succeeds in the sense that Frodo does not voluntarily destroy the ring, succeeds in the sense that the ring's corruption holds at the moment of crisis, succeeds in turning the bearer into the claimant. The ring's only mistake, the one thing the ring does not anticipate, is Gollum. The ring does not anticipate that its own former bearer, a creature it discarded centuries ago, will arrive at the crack of doom and will take the ring from Frodo and will fall into the fire. The ring does not anticipate grace. The ring cannot anticipate grace, because grace is, by its nature, unforeseeable, the intervention that comes from outside the system, the factor that no intelligence, no matter how vast, can account for. Part 24. The Ring's Claim. There is a legal dimension to what happens at the crack of doom that fans almost never discuss, a dimension rooted in Tolkien's deep knowledge of medieval lore and his professional expertise in Anglo-Saxon literature. When Frodo says the ring is mine, Frodo is making a claim, a declaration of ownership that has implications within the moral and spiritual framework of the story. Isildur made the same claim. After the Battle of the Last Alliance, when Sauron was overthrown and the ring was cut from his hand, Isildur took the ring and declared it his own, claimed it as Wergild, as compensation for the death of his father Elendil and his brother Anrion. Isildur's claim was legal in the medieval sense, a claim of rightful seizure, a claim that the victor has the right to the spoils of war. But the ring does not recognize mortal law. The ring recognizes only one master, Sauron. The ring allowed itself to be taken by Isildur because the ring had its own reasons. The ring intended to use Isildur, to betray Isildur, to return to Sauron through Isildur's downfall. The ring slipped from Isildur's finger at the Gladden Fields. Isildur was killed by orc arrows. The ring sank to the bottom of the river and waited. Frodo's claim at the Crack of Doom mirrors Isildur's claim at the Gladden Fields. Both claims are assertions of ownership. Both claims are the product of the ring's influence. Both claims represent the ring's strategy, the ring's method of preserving itself by convincing its bearer that the ring belongs to them rather than to Sauron. But Frodo's claim is more powerful than Isildur's. Isildur claimed the ring in a moment of grief and triumph, claimed it hot, in the aftermath of battle, when the emotions were high and the resistance was low. Frodo's claim is the product of months of systematic corruption, months of the ring working on Frodo's mind, months of the ring teaching Frodo to think of the ring as mine, months of the ring preparing the bearer for the moment when the claim would matter most. The ring's claim strategy reveals something important about the nature of the corruption. The ring does not simply overwhelm its bearer. The ring transforms its bearer, transforms the bearer's relationship with the ring from carrying to owning, from duty to desire, from mission to possession. The transformation is gradual, invisible, and ultimately irresistible. By the time the bearer reaches the Crack of Doom, the transformation is complete. The bearer is no longer carrying the ring on behalf of the free peoples. The bearer is carrying the ring on behalf of himself. Part 25. The Ring and Sauron's Awareness. There is a strategic dimension to the moment at the Crack of Doom that connects Frodo's failure to the broader war. A dimension that most fans miss because it happens simultaneously with the dramatic events on the mountainside. When Frodo puts the ring on his finger at the Crack of Doom, Sauron knows. Sauron has been searching for the ring throughout the entire War of the Ring. Sauron has sent the Nazgul to find it. Sauron has deployed armies to capture it. Sauron has used the Palantri to search for it. And now, at the moment when Frodo claims the ring at the very heart of Mordor, Sauron suddenly, terrifyingly, absolutely knows where the ring is. The eye turns. The great lidless eye of Barad Dr. swivels toward Mount Doom. Sauron perceives the ring, perceives the bearer, perceives the claim, perceives the threat. And Sauron is afraid. Not because Frodo is powerful. Frodo is not powerful. But because the ring is at the Crack of Doom. The ring is at the one place in the world where it can be destroyed. And Sauron, who has built his entire existence around the ring, who has invested his power and his will and his identity in the Golden Circle, suddenly realizes that everything he is hangs over an abyss of fire. Sauron's response is immediate and desperate. Sauron sends the Nazgul, all 9 of them, mounted on their fell beasts, flying at maximum speed toward Mount Doom. The Nazgul are Sauron's last resort, the final instrument of the ring's recovery. If the Nazgul reach Mount Doom before the ring is destroyed, the ring will be saved. The ring will return to Sauron. The war will be over. and not in the way the free peoples hoped. The desperation reveals something crucial about Sauron's psychology. Sauron, in this moment, experiences fear for the first time in 3,000 years. The Dark Lord who has sat in Burrad Doctor, confident, patient, certain of his eventual victory, suddenly realizes that his entire existence, his power, his kingdom, his identity, his being, hangs on a thread. The ring is at the crack of doom. A hobbit holds the ring at the edge of the fire. Everything that Sauron is, everything that Sauron has built, everything that Sauron has spent 3 millennia constructing, can be annihilated in a single moment if a small creature opens its hand. The fear is the ring's fear. Sauron's terror is the terror of a being who has invested his soul in an object, who has placed his existence outside himself, who has made his survival contingent on the survival of a small circle of gold. The investment that gave Sauron power is the investment that makes Sauron vulnerable. The strength is the weakness. The ring that amplifies Sauron's will is the ring whose destruction will end Sauron's existence. The Nazgul do not arrive in time. Gollum falls. The ring is destroyed. Sauron's power collapses instantly, catastrophically. The foundations of Barad Doctor crumble. The armies of Mordor are thrown into confusion. The Nazgul shriek and dissolve into nothing. The ring's destruction is Sauron's destruction, the end of the Dark Lord, the end of the shadow, the end of the evil that has haunted Middle-earth for 3,000 years. The timing is razor thin. The margin between salvation and damnation is measured in seconds. The seconds between Frodo's claim and Gollum's fall. The seconds between the ring's triumph and the ring's destruction. The seconds between the Nazgul's departure and the Nazgul's dissolution. The margin is so thin that it cannot be the product of planning. The margin is so thin that it can only be the product of grace. The precise, impossible, perfectly timed intervention of something larger than any mortal strategy. Part 26. The Oath and the Fall. There is a detail about Gollum's fall that fans debate endlessly, a detail that touches on the deepest questions of free will, fate, and divine intervention in Tolkien's mythology. How does Gollum fall? The text is deliberately ambiguous. Tolkien describes Gollum dancing on the edge of the precipice, holding the ring aloft, and then losing his footing and toppling into the fire. The description is simple, almost matter-of-fact. There is no dramatic intervention, no hand of God reaching down, no earthquake at the critical moment, no visible sign of supernatural agency. But Tolkien, in his letters, discusses the fall in terms that suggest something more than accident. Tolkien raises the possibility that Gollum's fall is the fulfillment of an oath, the oath that Gollum swore to Frodo on the ring itself. Gollum swore by the ring. In the Dead Marshes, Gollum swore to serve Frodo, swore on the precious, swore by the ring, made an oath that bound him to Frodo's service and that was witnessed and guaranteed by the ring's own power. And Gollum broke the oath. Gollum betrayed Frodo, led Frodo into Shelob's lair, schemed to murder Frodo, plotted to take the ring for himself. The oath, sworn on the ring, carries power. The oath is not merely a promise, the oath is a binding, a spiritual commitment that the ring itself enforces. When Gollum breaks the oath, the ring's own power turns against him. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through the deep logic of the world that Tolkien has built, the logic that says oaths matter, that betrayal has consequences, that the spiritual fabric of reality enforces the commitments that beings make. Gollum falls because the oath demands it. Gollum falls because the ring's own power, invoked by Gollum's oath and activated by Gollum's betrayal. ensures that the oathbreaker suffers the consequences of his treachery. The ring, in enforcing its own oath, destroys itself, a final irony, a last twist of fate, a demonstration that evil's instruments ultimately serve the purposes of the good. Tolkien describes this as the working of Ilvatar, the working of the One, the creator god of Tolkien's mythology, the divine will that operates beneath and through the events of the world, guiding the story toward its appointed end through mechanisms that the characters cannot see and that the ring cannot anticipate. Part 27. Gandalf's Foresight. Gandalf understood, perhaps not in detail, perhaps not with the precision of a strategist who can see the exact sequence of events that will lead to the ring's destruction. But Gandalf understood the principle. Gandalf understood that mercy toward Gollum was not merely morally right, it was strategically essential. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end. Gandalf says of Gollum early in the story, "And the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least." The words are prescient, almost prophetically so. Gandalf does not know how Gollum will play his part. Gandalf does not know that Gollum will be the instrument of the ring's destruction. But Gandalf knows, with the deep, intuitive Istari wisdom that is Gandalf's defining characteristic, that mercy matters. That the chain of compassion extends further than the compassionate can see. That the consequences of mercy are unpredictable, unknowable, uncontrollable, and therefore, paradoxically, more reliable than the consequences of calculation. Gandalf is Tolkien's voice on this question. Gandalf is the character who articulates the theology that governs the story's climax, the theology of mercy, of grace, of the eucatastrophe. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. The words are addressed to Frodo, are spoken in the context of Frodo's wish that Bilbo had killed Gollum when he had the chance. Frodo wants Gollum dead. Frodo sees Gollum as a threat, a dangerous, treacherous, pitiable creature who would be better off dead and whose death would make the quest safer and simpler. Gandalf redirects Frodo's thinking. Gandalf teaches Frodo the principle that will save the world. Do not kill when mercy is possible. Do not destroy when compassion is available. Do not choose violence when pity is an option. Because the consequences of mercy extend further than the consequences of violence, extend into dimensions that no mortal intelligence can predict, into outcomes that no strategic calculation can anticipate, into the realm of grace where the good that you do today produces the salvation that you need tomorrow. Frodo learns the lesson. Frodo shows mercy to Gollum. And the mercy, months later, at the crack of doom, accomplishes what Frodo's will could not, accomplishes what no will in Middle-earth could accomplish, what no strength of purpose could achieve, what no mortal effort could produce. The mercy destroys the ring. Part 28. Other ring-bearers. To fully understand why Frodo could not destroy the ring, we need to look at what the ring does to everyone who touches it. Because the pattern of corruption is consistent, and the consistency proves the point. Isildur takes the ring and claims it as his own. The ring betrays him, slips from his finger, exposes him to the enemy, gets him killed. The ring uses Isildur and discards him. Daegol finds the ring and is murdered for it within minutes. The ring's first act in the hands of the river folk is to cause a killing, to demonstrate, immediately and brutally, the principle that the ring corrupts through desire, and that the desire, when amplified, produces violence. Smaugol takes the ring through murder and is transformed into Gollum. 500 years of corruption. Total degradation. Complete loss of identity. Bilbo carries the ring for 60 years and becomes possessive, evasive, and stretched. Bilbo manages to give up the ring, barely, with external help, under the most favorable possible conditions. Sam carries the ring briefly and is tempted by visions of world-spanning gardens, tempted, even in his profound humility, by the ring's ability to find and amplify whatever desire exists in the bearer's heart. Boromir does not even carry the ring, and the ring still drives him to madness, still pushes him to attack Frodo, to betray the Fellowship, to act against his own deepest values and his own most fundamental loyalty. The pattern is absolute. Everyone who touches the ring is corrupted. Everyone who carries the ring is changed. No one, no mortal, no elf, no Maya, no being in Middle-earth, is immune to the ring's influence. The degree of corruption varies. The speed of corruption varies. But the direction is always the same, toward possession, toward obsession, toward the replacement of the bearer's identity with the ring's identity. Frodo is not different from these other bearers. Frodo is not specially immune. Frodo does not possess a secret resistance that the others lack. Frodo resists longer than most, resists better than Isildur, better than Gollum, better than Boromir. But Frodo cannot resist forever. No one can resist forever. The ring is patient. The ring is relentless. And the ring, at the crack of doom, is irresistible. Part 29. The ring's endgame. The ring has a plan that runs parallel to Frodo's plan, a plan that operates beneath the surface of the quest, a plan that most readers do not recognize because the ring's plan is disguised as Frodo's choices. The ring's plan is simple. Let the bearer carry it to Mount Doom. Let the bearer climb the mountain. Let the bearer enter the Samath Nor. And then, at the moment of crisis, at the instant when the bearer stands over the fire and contemplates the act of destruction, seize the bearer's will, claim the bearer's identity, transform the destroyer into the claimant. The ring allows itself to be carried to Mount Doom, because the ring does not fear the journey. The ring fears the destination, fears the fire, fears the only thing in the world that can unmake it. But the ring does not fear the bearer, because the ring knows, has always known, from the moment it attached itself to Frodo, that no bearer can voluntarily destroy it. The ring's confidence in its own corruption is absolute. The ring knows that the corruption will hold. The ring knows that months of work on Frodo's mind will pay off at the critical moment. The ring knows that its investment in Frodo's soul will produce the return it seeks. And the ring is right. The corruption holds. Frodo claims the ring. The ring's plan succeeds. The ring's only mistake is overconfidence. The ring does not account for Gollum, because the ring has already discarded Gollum, has already moved on from its former bearer, has already transferred its attention and its will to Frodo, has already dismissed Gollum as a spent instrument, a used-up tool. A creature whose purpose has been served and whose continued existence is irrelevant. The ring's arrogance mirrors Sauron's arrogance. Sauron does not imagine that anyone would try to destroy the ring, cannot conceive that a bearer would carry the ring to the fire rather than using it, cannot fathom the idea that the ring could be treated as something to be destroyed rather than something to be wielded. Sauron's failure of imagination is the ring's failure of imagination. The master's blindness is the instrument's blindness, and the blindness, at the moment of crisis, proves fatal. Part 30. The question of free will. Frodo's failure at the crack of doom raises a profound philosophical question, a question that Tolkien grappled with throughout his life and that the Lord of the Rings addresses with remarkable sophistication. Did Frodo have free will at the crack of doom? The question matters because moral responsibility depends on free will. If Frodo could not have done otherwise, if the ring's power at the crack of doom was so great that no possible exercise of will could have overcome it, then Frodo is not morally responsible for his failure. Frodo is the victim of an irresistible force, and victims are not culpable. Tolkien's answer, as expressed in his letters, is nuanced. Tolkien says that Frodo had done all that was in his power to do, that Frodo's moral effort throughout the quest was sufficient, that Frodo's resistance to the ring was as strong as any resistance could be, and that the final failure was not a failure of character, but a failure of capacity. The ring, at the crack of doom, was beyond any mortal's ability to resist. But Tolkien does not say that Frodo lacked free will entirely. Tolkien says that Frodo's free will was exhausted, worn down, depleted, consumed by the months of resistance that the journey demanded. Frodo's will was not taken from him. Frodo's will was spent, used up in the daily, hourly, moment-by-moment struggle to resist the ring's corruption. By the time Frodo reached the crack of doom, there was nothing left to spend. The will that might have cast the ring into the fire had already been used up, used in resisting the ring at Weathertop, at Amon Hen, at the Dead Marshes, at Cirith Ungol, on the plains of Gorgoroth. The theology is precise. Frodo is not absolved of moral agency. Frodo is recognized as having exercised moral agency to its limit, having used every ounce of moral strength that he possessed, having spent every reserve of will that he had, having given everything that he had to give. The failure at the end is not a sign of weakness. The failure at the end is the sign of a will that has been pushed past its breaking point, a will that has been asked to do more than any will can do, that has been stretched beyond the capacity of any mortal mind, that has broken not from cowardice, but from the sheer impossible, superhuman demand of carrying a fragment of a god's will to the place of its destruction. Part 31. Frodo after the quest. What happens to Frodo after the ring is destroyed tells us everything we need to know about the cost of carrying. Frodo returns to the Shire. The Shire has been damaged, scarred by Saruman's occupation, polluted, industrialized, its trees cut down, its gardens paved over. The scouring of the Shire is the Hobbits' battle, the battle that Merry and Pippin and Sam fight to restore their homeland. Frodo participates, but Frodo is different. Frodo is changed. Frodo is not the same Hobbit who left the Shire 2 years ago. Frodo cannot settle. Frodo cannot find peace. The ring is gone, but the wound remains. Not just the Morgul wound in his shoulder, which aches on the anniversary of Weathertop, but the deeper wound. The wound that the ring inflicted on his soul. The wound that cannot be healed by Athelas or by Elrond or by any art in Middle-earth. Frodo is carrying what modern readers might recognize as the symptoms of severe trauma. The flashbacks, sudden, disorienting returns to the darkness of Mordor, to the weight of the ring, to the voice that whispered mine in the depths of the mountain. The anniversary pain, the Morgul wound aching on October 6th, the date of the Weathertop attack, and on March 13th. The date when the spider's venom entered his blood, and on March 25th, the date when the ring was destroyed and the finger was lost. The inability to connect with the ordinary everyday pleasures that once defined his life, the food that tastes like ash, the sunsets that seem dimmed, the laughter that sounds distant. The sense of distance is the most devastating symptom. Frodo feels separated from the world by an invisible barrier, able to see the beauty of the Shire but unable to touch it, able to hear the joy of his friends but unable to share it. The ring has left Frodo permanently displaced, permanently shifted into a register of experience that the unhurt cannot access, permanently marked by a knowledge of darkness that the unmarked cannot understand. The exhaustion is bottomless. Not the ordinary tiredness of a traveler who has come home from a long journey, the existential exhaustion of a being who has carried a god's malice in his pocket for 6 months and who has been fighting every moment of every day against a force that wanted to consume him. The exhaustion does not lift. The exhaustion is permanent. The exhaustion is the price of the carrying, the cost that the ring extracted from Frodo's soul in exchange for the privilege of not being consumed entirely. Frodo writes. Frodo completes the Red Book of Westmarch, the record of the quest, the story that will become The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Frodo writes because writing is the one act that connects his experience to the world, the one way to give meaning to the suffering, to transform the wound into a testament, to make the pain count for something beyond the pain itself. And then Frodo leaves. Frodo goes to the Grey Havens. Frodo sails west, sails with Gandalf and Galadriel and Elrond and Bilbo, sails to the Blessed Realm, sails to the one place in the world where the wound can be healed. The sailing is not a reward. The sailing is a necessity. Frodo is too wounded to remain in Middle-earth. Frodo's soul has been damaged by the ring to a degree that no earthly healing can repair. The Blessed Realm, the place of the Valar, the place where the power that created the gifts and the blessings resides, is the only place where the kind of damage that the ring inflicts can be mended. Part 32. Sam's grief. Sam watches Frodo sail away. And Sam's grief, silent, undemonstrative, the grief of a gardener who has lost the one thing he could not grow back, is one of the most devastating moments in the entire mythology. Sam cannot follow Frodo. Not yet. Sam has a life in the Shire, a wife, children, a community that needs him, a garden that needs tending, a world that needs rebuilding. Sam's duty is to stay. Sam's duty is to live the ordinary, domestic, unglamorous life that Frodo sacrificed, to raise the children, to plant the trees, to rebuild the Shire that the Ring's War nearly destroyed. Sam does follow eventually. The appendices tell us that Sam, years later, sails west as well, sails to the Blessed Realm, the last of the ring-bearers to depart Middle-earth. The reunion is implied. The healing is implied. The restoration of the friendship that the quest forged and the quest's aftermath strained is implied. But the separation is real. The years between Frodo's departure and Sam's departure are years of grief, years in which Sam carries a loss that he cannot explain to anyone who was not there, a grief that the Shire's comfortable normalcy cannot accommodate, a wound that the return to ordinary life cannot heal. Sam's grief mirrors Frodo's wound. The ring damages everyone who touches it, and the damage extends beyond the bearer to the people who love the bearer. The ring wounded Frodo directly. The ring wounded Sam indirectly, wounded him through the loss of Frodo, through the separation that the ring's damage made necessary, through the understanding that the friend he carried up the mountain was too broken to remain in the world that the carrying saved. The ring's damage is not limited to its bearer. The ring's damage radiates outward, touches everyone in the bearer's orbit, wounds the friends and the companions and the loved ones who share the journey. The ring is a weapon that damages the world through the relationships of its bearer, that uses love as a conduit for suffering, that turns the bonds between people into channels through which pain flows. Part 33. The Scouring and Frodo's Restraint. The scouring of the Shire reveals something crucial about what the ring has done to Frodo, and what the ring has not done to him. During the scouring, Frodo does not fight. Merry and Pippin lead the military resistance against Saruman's ruffians. Sam organizes the reconstruction. But Frodo, who has faced the Nazgul, who has walked through Mordor, who has stood at the crack of doom, does not take up arms. Frodo's restraint is not weakness. Frodo's restraint is the final expression of the lesson that the ring taught him. The lesson that violence breeds violence, that power corrupts the powerful, that the use of force, even in a just cause, carries a cost that the user must bear. Frodo has seen what happens when you take up power. Frodo has felt the ring's seduction, has felt the temptation to use force to achieve good ends, has felt the pull of the argument that says the situation demands it, the cause is just, the enemy deserves it. And Frodo has seen where that argument leads. The argument leads to the crack of doom. The argument leads to the ring is mine. So Frodo does not fight. Frodo shows mercy, even to Saruman, the wizard who has devastated the Shire, who has cut down the trees and polluted the water and enslaved the hobbits. Frodo shows mercy to Saruman the way Frodo showed mercy to Gollum. Not because Saruman deserves mercy, but because mercy is the only response that does not perpetuate the cycle of violence that the ring represents. The other hobbits do not fully understand Frodo's restraint. The other hobbits see it as passivity, as weakness, as the reluctance of a traumatized hobbit who has been through too much and who no longer has the stomach for a fight. But the restraint is not weakness. The restraint is the deepest wisdom that the ring's journey has produced. The understanding that violence, even righteous violence, carries a cost, and that the cost must be weighed against the benefit, and that sometimes the cost is too high. Part 34. The ring as mirror. The ring shows each bearer a version of themselves, a distorted, amplified, corrupted version, but a version that is recognizably theirs. The ring is a mirror that reflects your desires back at you in monstrous form. Gollum sees in the ring a friend, the one constant presence in a life of isolation and degradation. The ring becomes Gollum's only relationship, the only being that Gollum talks to, the only thing that Gollum loves, the only connection that Gollum has to anything outside himself. The ring replaces every human bond that Gollum once had, replaces family, replaces friendship, replaces community, until Gollum's entire emotional life is contained in his relationship with the ring. Boromir sees in the ring a weapon, the instrument of his city's salvation, the tool that will give him the power to defeat the enemy that threatens everything he loves. Boromir's vision of the ring is not evil. Boromir does not see the ring as a tool of domination. Boromir sees the ring as a defender, a protector, a shield. But the shield becomes a sword. The defender becomes a conqueror. The tool of salvation becomes the instrument of corruption. Sam sees in the ring a garden, a vast, impossibly beautiful garden that fills the world. A garden tended by Samwise the Great. A garden that represents Sam's deepest desire, magnified to cosmic proportions. The vision is absurd, and Sam recognizes its absurdity immediately, which is why Sam is able to resist the temptation. Sam knows that he is a gardener, not a king. Sam knows that one garden is enough. Sam knows that a garden that fills the world is not a garden at all. It is a tyranny with flowers. Frodo sees in the ring himself. Not a grander self, not a more powerful self, not a version of himself magnified to superhuman proportions. Frodo sees himself, small, tired, overwhelmed, alone, and the ring whispers, "You deserve this. You have earned this. You have carried this weight further than anyone could have asked. The ring is yours. You have paid for it with your suffering. The ring is the price of the journey, and you, Frodo, have paid the price." The temptation is devastating because it is true. Frodo has carried the weight. Frodo has suffered. Frodo has paid a price that no one else could pay. And the ring takes this truth, takes the legitimate, undeniable, heartbreaking truth of Frodo's sacrifice, and uses it as the final argument for claiming rather than destroying. Part 35. What Sauron cannot understand. Sauron's greatest weakness, the weakness that ultimately destroys him, is a failure of imagination. Sauron cannot imagine that anyone would want to destroy the ring. Sauron can imagine someone trying to use the ring against him. Sauron can imagine a rival seizing the ring and building a competing empire. Sauron can imagine Gandalf with the ring, or Aragorn with the ring, or Galadriel with the ring, can imagine the struggles for power that would follow. The wars between ring wielders, the contest of wills that would determine who masters the ring and who is mastered by it. But Sauron cannot imagine destruction. Sauron cannot conceive of a being who would hold the ring, who would hold infinite power in his hand and choose to throw it away. The idea is not merely unlikely in Sauron's mind. The idea is incomprehensible. The idea is foreign to Sauron's nature, in the same way that color is foreign to a blind man or music to the deaf. Sauron literally does not have the capacity to understand a mind that would choose powerlessness over power. This failure of imagination is not merely a character flaw. It is the defining characteristic of evil in Tolkien's theology. Evil cannot understand good. Evil can manipulate good, can exploit good, can corrupt good, but evil cannot understand good, because understanding requires a capacity for empathy that evil, by its nature, has destroyed in itself. Sauron has invested so much of himself in the will to dominate that Sauron has lost the ability to conceive of any other kind of will. Sauron's mind is the ring's mind, narrow, obsessive, focused entirely on mastery, incapable of imagining a world in which mastery is not the highest value. Sauron cannot imagine Frodo, because Frodo represents a kind of being that Sauron's philosophy does not admit, a being who would carry power to its destruction rather than wielding it, a being who values mercy over mastery, a being who would rather be good than be great. The failure of imagination is why Sauron loses, not because Sauron is weaker than the free peoples, not because Sauron's armies are outnumbered, not because the strategic situation favors the West. Sauron loses because Sauron cannot see the strategy that defeats him, cannot see the small hobbit walking into the fire, because the small hobbit walking into the fire is invisible to a mind that can only see power. Part 36. The Fellowship's role. The destruction of the ring is not Frodo's achievement alone. The destruction of the ring is the achievement of the entire Fellowship, every member of which plays a role that is necessary, indispensable, and irreplaceable. Gandalf provides the wisdom. Gandalf identifies the ring. Gandalf sets the quest in motion. Gandalf teaches Frodo the principle of mercy that will save the world. Without Gandalf's insight, the ring is never identified. Without Gandalf's counsel, the ring is never taken to Mount Doom. Without Gandalf's teaching, Frodo never shows mercy to Gollum. Aragorn provides the diversion. Aragorn leads the armies of the West to the Black Gate of Mordor, a desperate, deliberately suicidal assault designed to draw Sauron's attention away from Mount Doom, to empty Mordor of its defenders, to create a corridor through which two hobbits can crawl to the fire. Without Aragorn's diversion, Frodo and Sam are captured and killed long before they reach the mountain. Merry and Pippin play their parts that seem incidental until you trace the chain of causation backward from the crack of doom. Merry helps kill the Witch King at the Pelennor Fields, removes the chief of the Nazgul, the most powerful of Sauron's servants, the being who might have been sent to the crack of doom if he had survived. The Witch King's death is not incidental to the ring's destruction. The Witch King's death ensures that the most powerful Nazgul is not available to intercept Frodo on the mountain, not available to seize the ring at the last moment, not available to prevent the events that lead to Gollum's fall. Pippin looks into the Palantir and inadvertently misleads Sauron, causing Sauron to believe that the hobbit who carries the ring is in the custody of Saruman, diverting Sauron's attention at a critical moment. The diversion is not planned. Pippin's curiosity, which Gandalf calls foolish, produces a strategic advantage that no deliberate intelligence operation could have achieved. The accident creates an opening. The opening creates time. The time creates the space in which Frodo can move toward Mordor without the full weight of Sauron's attention bearing down on him. Pippin later serves in Gondor, swearing allegiance to Denethor, and his presence in the Citadel leads directly to the rescue of Faramir from Denethor's funeral pyre. Faramir's survival ensures that the steward's line continues, ensures that the transition of power from steward to king proceeds smoothly, ensures that the political structure of the restored kingdom has continuity. The chain of consequences extends from a hobbit's foolish curiosity to the political stability of the Fourth Age. Boromir dies defending Merry and Pippin. Boromir's death, his redemption, his last stand against the Uruk-hai, ensures that Merry and Pippin survive to play their roles. Boromir falls, but Boromir's fall is not wasted. Boromir's sacrifice is a link in the chain that leads to the ring's destruction. Legolas and Gimli fight at the Pelennor Fields and at the Black Gate, adding their strength to the diversion that creates the space for Frodo's approach. Every sword stroke at the Black Gate is a stroke in defense of Frodo's mission, every orc killed, every troll brought down, every moment of resistance is a moment in which Sauron's attention is held elsewhere while two hobbits climb a mountain. The Fellowship is the mechanism. The Fellowship is the collaborative effort that produces the conditions for grace. The Fellowship does not destroy the ring, grace destroys the ring. But the Fellowship creates the conditions in which grace can operate. The Fellowship carries the burden to the threshold. And then grace carries it the rest of the way. Part 37. The role of providence. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, there are moments that feel orchestrated, moments that seem too perfectly timed, too precisely arranged, too neatly coordinated to be the product of chance alone. Bilbo finds the ring in the dark. Of all the creatures in the goblin tunnels, of all the beings who might have stumbled upon the ring in the darkness beneath the misty mountains, it is a hobbit, a member of the one race in Middle-earth that is most resistant to the ring's corruption. Who picks it up? The ring has been lying in the dark for centuries, waiting for someone to find it. The ring intended to be found by an orc, or a goblin, or some creature of darkness who would carry it back to Sauron. Instead, the ring is found by a hobbit on an adventure, a being whose desires are so modest that the ring barely knows what to do with them. Gandalf reflects on this coincidence. Gandalf tells Frodo that there was something at work beyond the ring's own design, that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, that the finding was not an accident, but a purpose, that the long chain of events that led to the ring's destruction began with a hobbit's hand reaching down in the dark and touching cold gold. The word meant is significant. Meant implies intent, implies a mind behind the events, a will that guides the story toward an appointed end. Gandalf does not name the mind. Gandalf does not say God arranged this. But the implication is clear. The finding of the ring by Bilbo is not a coincidence. The finding is the first move in a strategy that operates at a level above the character's comprehension. A strategy that uses free choices and apparent accidents to produce outcomes that no individual participant could have planned. Gandalf arrives at Bag End at exactly the right moment. arrives when Frodo is old enough to understand the burden, when Sauron has returned to Mordor, when the pieces are in place for the quest to begin. The timing is not accidental. The timing is the product of Gandalf's wisdom, perhaps, but also of something deeper, something that operates beneath the level of individual decision-making. The Fellowship is assembled from exactly the right beings, from exactly the combination of skills, temperaments, loyalties, and capacities that the quest requires. The Fellowship is not randomly chosen. The Fellowship is curated, selected by Elrond, guided by Gandalf, shaped by a wisdom that sees further than any individual participant can see. Tolkien calls this force Ilvatar, the One, the Creator God, the divine will that operates through and beneath the events of the world. Ilvatar does not intervene directly. Ilvatar does not reach down and move the pieces on the board. Ilvatar works through the choices of free beings, through the mercy that Bilbo shows to Gollum, through the loyalty that Sam shows to Frodo, through the wisdom that Gandalf shows in guiding the quest. The providence is real, but invisible. The providence works through freedom, not against it. The providence does not compel, it invites. The providence creates opportunities. Opportunities for mercy, for courage, for the kind of choices that produce consequences beyond the chooser's ability to foresee. And the characters freely choose well. Not always Boromir falls, Denethor despairs, Frodo claims the ring. But often enough. And at the critical moments, and the critical choices, freely made, produce the outcome that Providence intended. Part 38. Comparing Frodo to Isildur. The comparison between Frodo and Isildur is built into the structure of The Lord of the Rings, and the comparison reveals exactly what Tolkien is trying to say about the nature of moral heroism. Isildur had the chance to destroy the ring. After the Battle of the Last Alliance, after Sauron's defeat, after the ring was cut from his hand. Isildur took the ring and claimed it as his own. Elrond and Credan counselled him to destroy it, counselled him to cast it into the fire and be done with Sauron's legacy forever. Isildur refused. Isildur claimed the ring as Wurgild, as compensation for the death of his father Elendil and his brother Anrion. The claim was legal in the medieval sense. The claim was morally understandable. Isildur had just fought the most terrible battle in the history of the world. Isildur had just lost his father. Isildur was exhausted, grieving, and standing in the presence of an object of overwhelming beauty and overwhelming power. But Isildur's circumstances were far more favourable than Frodo's. Isildur had not been carrying the ring for months. Isildur had not been subjected to the ring's sustained, systematic, escalating corruption. Isildur picked up the ring and was immediately tempted, but the temptation was sudden, not cumulative. The temptation was the ring's opening move, not its endgame. If Isildur, who was experiencing the ring's influence for the first time, could not resist the temptation, how could Frodo, who had been subjected to the ring's influence for months, be expected to do better? The comparison is not meant to diminish Isildur. The comparison is meant to demonstrate the ring's power. Isildur was a great man, a hero of the Last Alliance, a warrior of enormous courage, the founder of the kingdoms in exile. Isildur was not weak. Isildur was not cowardly. Isildur was simply mortal, simply a being whose will, however strong, was insufficient to overcome the ring's influence at the moment of crisis. Frodo is not greater than Isildur. Frodo is humbler than Isildur, and the humility, paradoxically, is what allows Frodo to carry the ring further than Isildur could. Isildur's greatness, his royal identity, his warrior's pride, his king's ambition, gives the ring more material to corrupt. Frodo's smallness, his hobbit nature, his lack of ambition, his fundamental modesty, gives the ring less. But less is not nothing. And the ring, given enough time and enough proximity to its source, can corrupt even the humblest soul in Middle-earth. Part 39. The ring's effect on time. There is a dimension of the ring's corruption that Tolkien explores with great subtlety. A dimension that connects the ring's nature to one of the deepest themes of his mythology. The ring stops time. Not literally, the ring does not freeze the clock or halt the movement of the sun. But the ring stops the bearer's relationship with time, stops the aging, stops the natural progression from youth to maturity to old age to death, stops the process by which mortal beings move through the world and eventually leave it. The ring preserves. The ring keeps its bearer alive long past the natural span, keeps them frozen, suspended, unchanging, while the world around them ages and passes and transforms. Bilbo does not age during his 60 years with the ring. Gollum does not age during his 500 years. The ring-bearers are trapped in a kind of temporal amber, alive but not living, existing but not progressing, present but not participating in the flow of time that defines mortal existence. This preservation is not a gift. This preservation is a prison. Tolkien, as a Catholic, believed that mortality was the gift of Ilúvatar to men, the gift of freedom from the world, the permission to leave, the release from the burden of endless existence. The ring's preservation is the opposite of the gift. The ring traps its bearer in the world, denies the release, refuses the permission to leave. The ring makes its bearer immortal in the worst possible sense, not by giving them eternal youth, but by denying them the mercy of death. The ring's relationship with time is a mirror of Sauron's relationship with time. Sauron is trapped in Middle-earth, bound to the world, unable to leave, unable to die, unable to move beyond the circles of the world into whatever lies beyond. Sauron's existence is a prison of perpetual presence, an endless, unchanging, repetitive existence that produces nothing new and discovers nothing unexpected. The ring imposes this same prison on its bearers, traps them in a version of Sauron's own condition, freezes them in the amber of the Dark Lord's timeless, joyless, endlessly repeating malice. Frodo feels this. Frodo feels the ring pulling him out of time, feels the world becoming distant, feels the colours fading, feels the ordinary pleasures of mortal life becoming remote and unreachable. The ring is trying to make Frodo a wraith, trying to pull Frodo out of the mortal world and into the unseen world, trying to transform Frodo from a living hobbit into a shadow, a ghost, a being who exists between life and death in a state of perpetual, tormented suspension. The Morgul wound accelerates the process. The wound that the Witch King inflicted at Weathertop is a gateway to the Wraith world, a crack in Frodo's soul through which the ring can pull him into the unseen. If the wound had not been treated by Elrond, Frodo would have become a wraith, would have crossed fully into the shadow world and become a lesser Nazgul, a servant of the ring, a creature trapped forever between life and death. Part 40. Frodo's Mercy, the full count. Let me catalogue Frodo's acts of mercy toward Gollum, because the full count reveals just how many times Frodo chose compassion when pragmatism demanded violence. First, Frodo listens to Gandalf. When Gandalf tells Frodo the story of Gollum, Frodo's initial reaction is revulsion. Frodo wishes that Bilbo had killed Gollum when he had the chance. Gandalf corrects him. Frodo accepts the correction. This is the first act of mercy, the acceptance of the principle, the willingness to consider pity rather than violence, the openness to the idea that even the wretched deserve compassion. Second, Frodo spares Gollum on the Emyn Muil. When Gollum is captured, when the crawling, hissing creature is subdued and bound and lies helpless at Frodo's feet, Frodo does not kill him. Sam wants to kill him. Sam argues for killing him. Sam sees the danger and wants to eliminate it. Frodo refuses. Frodo shows mercy, not because mercy is safe, not because mercy is strategic, but because mercy is right. Third, Frodo accepts Gollum as a guide. Frodo trusts Gollum, or rather, Frodo extends trust to Gollum as an act of faith, a gamble on the possibility that somewhere inside the corrupted creature there is still a fragment of the person Gollum once was. The trust is not blind. Frodo knows that Gollum is dangerous. Frodo knows that Gollum wants the ring, but Frodo extends the trust anyway, because trust is the only alternative to violence, and violence is the path that the ring wants Frodo to take. Fourth, Frodo calls Gollum Sméagol. This is perhaps the most significant act of mercy in the entire sequence, and the most easily overlooked. Frodo uses Gollum's original name. Frodo addresses the creature not as the monster he has become, but as the person he once was. The naming is an act of recognition, a declaration that the person inside the monster still exists, that the corruption has not been total, that redemption, however unlikely, is not impossible. Fifth, Frodo defends Gollum against Sam. Frodo consistently protects Gollum from Sam's hostility, interposes himself between Sam's suspicion and Gollum's vulnerability, insists on treating Gollum with a respect that Gollum has done nothing to earn. The defense costs Frodo, costs him Sam's trust, costs him the support of his most loyal companion, creates a rift between Frodo and Sam that the ring exploits. Sixth, Frodo does not kill Gollum on Mount Doom. On the slopes of the mountain, Gollum attacks Frodo, makes a final, desperate attempt to take the ring by force. Sam drives Gollum off. Frodo could kill Gollum. Frodo has every justification. Gollum has attacked him. Gollum has betrayed him. Gollum is a mortal threat to the quest. But Frodo does not kill. Frodo lets Gollum go. Each act of mercy is a link in the chain. Each act of mercy extends the sequence that ends at the crack of doom, with Gollum falling into the fire. Each act of mercy is a choice, a free, deliberate, costly choice, that Frodo makes against his own self-interest, against Sam's advice, against the ring's influence, against every rational argument for eliminating the threat that Gollum represents. The mercy is the heroism. The mercy is the victory. The mercy is the thing that Frodo accomplishes that no one else in the story could have accomplished. The sustained, repeated, costly extension of compassion toward a creature that everyone else would have killed. And the mercy is what saves the world. Part 41. What Sam learns. Sam's arc in the story is, in part, the arc of learning to see Gollum the way Frodo sees him, and Sam's education is incomplete, painful, and ultimately transformative. Sam hates Gollum. This is not too strong a word. Sam regards Gollum with deep, instinctive, unwavering hostility, sees the creature as a threat, a nuisance, a danger that should be eliminated at the earliest opportunity. Sam's hostility is not irrational. Sam's hostility is the practical, common-sense response of a loyal servant who sees his master endangered by a creature that obviously cannot be trusted. But Sam is wrong. Not wrong about the danger. Gollum is dangerous, and Gollum does betray Frodo. But wrong about the response. Sam's instinct is to kill, to eliminate the threat, to remove the danger, to protect Frodo by destroying the thing that threatens Frodo. And if Sam's instinct had been followed, if Sam had killed Gollum at any point during the journey, the ring could not have been destroyed. Sam learns this too late. Sam does not fully understand the role that Gollum plays until after the ring is destroyed, until after the fire, until after the fall, until after the world is saved by the creature that Sam wanted to kill. The understanding is devastating. The understanding forces Sam to reckon with the possibility that his own instincts, his love for Frodo, his fierce protectiveness, his willingness to kill for Frodo's safety, were wrong. Not wrong in motive, wrong in method. Not wrong in heart, wrong in strategy. Sam's education is Tolkien's education of the reader. Most readers share Sam's instinct. Most readers want Gollum dead. Most readers see Gollum as a threat and want the threat eliminated. And Tolkien, gently, patiently, through the mechanism of the story, teaches the reader what he teaches Sam, that the instinct to destroy the threat is itself a threat. That the desire to kill the enemy is a desire that the ring cultivates and exploits. That mercy, foolish, impractical, dangerous mercy, is the only force that can overcome the darkness. Part 42. The Ring and Identity. The ring's deepest corruption is not the corruption of desire. The ring's deepest corruption is the corruption of identity. The ring does not merely change what you want. The ring changes who you are. The ring replaces your identity with its identity, substitutes the ring's will for your will, the ring's desires for your desires, the ring's personality for your personality. The ring does not corrupt you. The ring replaces you. Gollum is the clearest example. Sméagol, the person, the individual, the being with a name and a history and a personality, is replaced by Gollum. The replacement is not complete. Sméagol still exists inside Gollum, speaking in the famous split dialogue, arguing with the ring persona, fighting for control of the body that both personalities inhabit. But the replacement is dominant. Gollum is in control. Sméagol is the prisoner. The ring has installed its own operating system in a body that used to run on Sméagol's. Frodo feels this happening to him. Frodo feels his identity eroding, feels the ring replacing his thoughts with its thoughts, his desires with its desires, his sense of self with its sense of self. Frodo's declaration at the crack of doom, "The ring is mine," is the moment when the replacement is nearly complete. The words are not Frodo's words. The words are the ring's words, spoken through Frodo's mouth, using Frodo's voice, wearing Frodo's face. The horror of the moment is the horror of identity theft, the horror of watching yourself disappear, of hearing your own voice say things that you do not believe, of watching your own hand do things that you do not choose. Frodo at the crack of doom is not Frodo. Frodo at the crack of doom is a shell, a vehicle, a puppet, a body that the ring is wearing the way Frodo once wore the ring. The reversal is complete. The bearer becomes the born. The one who carries becomes the one who is carried. The ring, which Frodo has been carrying for months, is now carrying Frodo, wearing Frodo, inhabiting Frodo, using Frodo as a means to its own ends. This is why Frodo cannot destroy the ring. Not because Frodo is weak, because Frodo is not there. The being who stands at the crack of doom and says the ring is mine is not the being who left the Shire 6 months ago. The being who claims the ring is the ring's creation, the product of months of systematic identity replacement, the shell that remains when the ring has consumed the person. Part 43. What the fire represents. The fire of Mount Doom, the crack of doom, the Sammath Nor, the place where the ring was forged, is not merely a plot device. The fire is a theological symbol that carries meaning far beyond its narrative function. The fire is the fire of creation. The fire is the force that Sauron used to bind his will to gold, the force that transformed raw metal into a vessel of consciousness, a container of will, an object that carries a fragment of a dark god's soul. The fire is the only force that can unmake what it made, the only power that can dissolve the binding, break the enchantment, Release the will that was imprisoned in the gold. The fire is also the fire of judgment. The fire is the place where the ring is tested, the place where the ring's power is at its peak, the place where the ring's claim on its bearer is most absolute. The fire is the trial, the final, ultimate, unpassable test that the ring imposes on everyone who carries it to the edge. And the fire is the fire of transformation. The fire does not merely destroy the ring. The fire transforms the world, breaks the binding that holds Sauron's power together, collapses the structure of evil that the ring sustains, unmakes the dark architecture that has defined Middle-earth for 3,000 years. The fire does not merely destroy an object. The fire reshapes reality. Frodo stands at the edge of this fire, at the boundary between the world as it is and the world as it could be. Frodo holds in his hand the key to the transformation, the object whose destruction will reshape the world, will end the darkness, will free the peoples of Middle-earth from the shadow that has haunted them for millennia. And the fire defeats Frodo. Not because the fire is too hot, not because the fire is too frightening, because the fire is the ring's home, the source of the ring's power, the place where the ring is strongest, the place where the ring's will is most concentrated and most overwhelming. The fire that would destroy the ring is also the fire that empowers the ring. And the empowerment at the moment of crisis is stronger than the destruction. The paradox is fundamental. The place where the ring can be destroyed is also the place where the ring is invincible. The fire that would unmake the ring is the fire that makes the ring undroppable. The solution and the problem exist in the same location, and the problem, at the moment of contact, is stronger than the solution. Only grace can resolve the paradox. Only something from outside the system, something that is not the fire and not the ring and not the will of the bearer, can break the deadlock. And the grace arrives in the form of a crawling, hissing, ring-obsessed creature who has been following the bearer since the Emyn Muil. Part 44. The moral of pity. Tolkien's moral is precise and it is radical. Pity is stronger than the will to dominate. Not stronger in the way that a sword is stronger than a shield. Not stronger in the way that a larger army defeats a smaller one. Stronger in the way that water is stronger than stone. Patient, persistent, working through channels that force cannot open, achieving results that violence cannot produce. Pity is the force that the ring cannot corrupt, because pity is not an expression of will. Pity is not an assertion of power. Pity is not a desire for mastery or control. Pity is the opposite of all of these. Pity is the recognition of another being's suffering, the willingness to set aside self-interest in the face of another's pain, the choice to show compassion when the situation demands nothing of the kind. The ring cannot corrupt pity because the ring operates through desire, and pity is not a desire. Pity is a response. Pity is a reaction to the world as it is, a reaction that does not seek to change the world through force, but that acknowledges the world's suffering and responds to it with gentleness. Frodo's pity for Gollum is the force that destroys the ring. Not directly, not through a causal chain that Frodo could have predicted or controlled, but through the mechanism of grace, through the principle that mercy produces consequences beyond the merciful's ability to foresee, that compassion sets in motion chains of events that no strategic calculation could anticipate, that the choice to spare a life today creates possibilities tomorrow that would not exist if the life had been taken. The moral is not easy. The moral does not promise that pity will always produce good outcomes. The moral does not guarantee that mercy will always be rewarded. The moral says only this, that pity is the one force in the world that evil cannot turn to its own purposes. Pity is the one arrow in the quiver that the ring cannot redirect. Pity is the one card in the deck that the darkness cannot play. Part 45. The theology of the ending. The ending of The Lord of the Rings is not a happy ending. The ending is a bittersweet ending, an ending that acknowledges both the victory and the cost, both the salvation and the loss, both the achievement and the price. The ring is destroyed, the world is saved, Sauron is defeated, the darkness is lifted, the free peoples are free, the king returns to his throne, the Shire is restored, the trees grow again. But Frodo is broken. Frodo cannot be healed in Middle-earth. Frodo must leave the world that he saved, must sail west, must go to the Blessed Realm, must abandon the Shire and the friends and the life that he sacrificed everything to protect. The Saviour cannot enjoy the salvation. The hero cannot live in the world that his heroism preserved. The bittersweet ending is theologically necessary. The bittersweet ending is Tolkien's acknowledgement that the victory over evil is never complete, that the defeat of the darkness always comes at a cost, that the cost is borne by the one who stands closest to the fire, that the hero's reward is not a throne or a crown, but a wound that will not heal and a departure that cannot be postponed. Frodo's departure is the counterweight to the eucatastrophe. The eucatastrophe says, grace saves the world. Frodo's departure says, grace costs the world. The two statements are complementary. The two statements together constitute Tolkien's complete vision of the relationship between good and evil. A vision in which good triumphs but good suffers, in which evil is defeated but the defeat leaves scars, in which the world is saved but the Saviour is lost. The theology is Catholic in structure. The theology says that salvation is real, but that salvation requires sacrifice. The theology says that the darkness can be overcome, but that the overcoming changes the one who overcomes. The theology says that the world can be redeemed, but that the Redeemer bears the marks of the redemption forever. Part 46. Why the ring cannot be used for good. The Council of Elrond considers the option. Could the ring be used? Could the ring be wielded against Sauron, turned against its maker, employed in the service of the good? The answer is no. And the reason the answer is no cuts to the heart of Tolkien's moral vision. The ring cannot be used for good, because the ring is the will to dominate, and the will to dominate cannot produce good outcomes regardless of the intentions of the wielder. The ring would give its wielder power, but the power would be the power of domination, and domination is inherently evil regardless of the purpose it serves. A good person wielding the ring would not remain a good person. The ring would corrupt the good intentions, would transform the desire to help into a desire to control, the desire to protect into a desire to dominate, the desire to serve into a desire to master. The corruption is not optional. The corruption is built into the ring's nature. The ring is domination, and anyone who uses domination as a tool becomes a dominator, regardless of the purpose for which the tool was originally taken up. This is why Gandalf refuses the ring. This is why Galadriel refuses the ring. This is why Aragorn refuses the ring. The wise understand that the ring cannot be separated from its nature, that the ring's power and the ring's corruption are the same thing, that you cannot use the power without being consumed by the corruption. The impossibility of using the ring for good is the reason the ring must be destroyed. And the impossibility of destroying the ring through an act of will is the reason the story ends the way it does, not with a heroic act of self-sacrifice, but with a messy, accidental, grace-driven tumble into the fire. The story ends with an accident, because the story must end with an accident. The story cannot end with a heroic act, because a heroic act would be an act of will, and an act of will would be an act of domination, and an act of domination would be the ring's food. The story ends with grace because grace is the only force that can break the cycle. The cycle of will and corruption, of power and domination, of strength and subjugation that the ring represents. Part 47. The ring's last temptation. There is one final temptation that the ring offers Frodo, a temptation so subtle that most readers do not recognize it as a temptation at all. The ring offers Frodo the temptation of heroism. The ring whispers, "Destroy me, and you will be the greatest hero in the history of the world. Destroy me, and your name will be remembered forever. Destroy me, and you will have accomplished what no one else could accomplish, the single greatest act of courage, of self-sacrifice, of moral strength in the entire mythology." The temptation is exquisitely crafted because it targets Frodo's humility. Frodo does not want to be a hero. Frodo does not want glory. But the ring knows that even the humblest being has a relationship with the idea of heroism, a relationship that can be exploited, a desire to matter, to count, to make a difference in the world. The ring offers Frodo the chance to matter, the chance to be the one who destroyed the ring, the chance to be the hero of the story, the chance to transform the suffering of the journey into the triumph of the climax. And the offer is itself a corruption, because the desire to be the hero is a form of pride, and pride is the ring's native tongue. If Frodo had destroyed the ring through an act of will, if Frodo had thrown the ring into the fire in a moment of heroic self-overcoming, the act would have been contaminated by pride. The act would have been Frodo's act, Frodo's achievement, Frodo's victory, Frodo's triumph. And the triumph would have been a form of mastery, a demonstration that Frodo's will was stronger than the ring's will, that Frodo's strength was greater than Sauron's strength, that the hero's power exceeded the villain's power. But that is not how the story ends. The story ends with Frodo failing, and the failure is the mercy. The failure removes the pride. The failure ensures that the ring's destruction is not an act of mastery but an act of grace, not a triumph of the will but a gift of the universe, not a hero's achievement but a divine intervention accomplished through the clumsy, accidental, unplanned tumble of a creature that everyone had written off as irredeemable. The failure is the point. The failure is the theology. The failure is Tolkien's deepest statement about the nature of goodness in a fallen world. Part 48. The Ring and Morgoth's Ring. There is a parallel in Tolkien's mythology that most fans miss. A parallel that illuminates the ring's nature and explains why the ring, at the crack of doom, is truly irresistible. In the Silmarillion and in Tolkien's later philosophical writings, Tolkien develops a concept he calls Morgoth's Ring. The concept is this: Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, the master of Sauron, poured his power not into a ring, but into the entire physical world. Morgoth's ring is Arda itself, the earth, the stone, the substance of the physical world. Morgoth disseminated his power so widely that his influence became indistinguishable from the fabric of reality. Sauron learned from Morgoth. But Sauron made a different choice. Instead of spreading his power across the entire world, Sauron concentrated his power in a single object. The One Ring is Sauron's version of Morgoth's dissemination. The same principle of investing yourself in something external, but focused, concentrated, compressed into a small golden circle. The concentration is both the ring's strength and its vulnerability. The strength is obvious. The ring, because it contains so much of Sauron's power, is extraordinarily potent. The ring can dominate the other rings. The ring can bend wills. The ring can corrupt the strongest beings in Middle-earth. The concentration of power in one object makes the ring the most powerful artifact in the world. The vulnerability is equally obvious. The ring, because it contains so much of Sauron's power, can be destroyed. and its destruction will destroy Sauron along with it. Morgoth's ring cannot be destroyed, because Morgoth's ring is the world itself. You would have to unmake reality to undo Morgoth's dissemination. But Sauron's ring can be destroyed, can be thrown into the fire that made it, can be unmade by the force that made it, can be dissolved back into the raw gold from which it was forged. The parallel explains why the ring, at the crack of doom, is so overwhelmingly powerful. The ring is not merely an object at the crack of doom. The ring is at home. The ring is in the place where Sauron's will was first bound to matter, the place where the investment was made, the place where the concentration occurred. The ring, at the crack of doom, is Sauron at his most present, the fragment of the Dark Lord's soul at its most active, its most aware, its most desperately engaged in the struggle for survival. The ring at the crack of doom is Sauron fighting for his life. Not metaphorically. Literally, the ring is the vessel that contains Sauron's existence. The destruction of the ring is the death of Sauron. The ring knows this. The ring feels this. And the ring, at the moment of mortal crisis, brings every particle of Sauron's concentrated will to bear on the one being who stands between the ring and the fire. No mortal mind can withstand this. No mortal will can resist the concentrated, desperate, existentially threatened will of a fallen angel fighting for its survival. The ring at the crack of doom is not an object being carried to destruction. The ring at the crack of doom is a god begging for its life, and the begging, the desperation, the absolute urgency of the ring's self-preservation instinct is a force that no creature of flesh and blood can overcome. Part 49. What Frodo accomplished. Despite everything, despite the failure at the crack of doom, despite the inability to voluntarily destroy the ring, despite the claim that the ring is mine, Frodo accomplished something that no other being in Middle-earth could have accomplished. Frodo carried the ring to Mount Doom. This is the achievement. Not the destruction, the carrying. Frodo carried a fragment of a dark god's soul across hundreds of miles of hostile territory, through Mordor itself, up the slopes of the volcano, to the very edge of the fire. Frodo carried the weight that no one else could carry. Frodo bore the burden that no one else could bear. Frodo endured the corruption that would have destroyed any other being long before the mountain was reached. The carrying is the heroism. The carrying is what Frodo was asked to do, and what Frodo did, perfectly, completely, beyond any reasonable expectation. Frodo was not asked to destroy the ring. Frodo was asked to carry the ring to the place where it could be destroyed. And Frodo carried it. Consider the journey. Consider the distances, the dangers, the obstacles. Consider the Nazgul at Weathertop. Consider the mines of Moria, where the Fellowship walked through darkness and fire and fought a Balrog of Morgoth. Consider the breaking of the Fellowship at Amon Hen. Consider the dead marshes, where the dead reach up with pale hands. Consider the approach to the Black Gate, where Frodo and Sam see the armies of Mordor assembling and must turn aside into the terrible alternative of Cirith Ungol. Consider the stairs, the spider, the tower of the orcs. Consider the plains of Gorgoroth, where Frodo crawls through ash and dust under the shadow of the enemy's gaze. Consider that Frodo does all of this while carrying a piece of a god's will around his neck, while fighting, every moment, against a force that wants to consume him, while resisting, every breath, the constant, escalating, never-ending pressure of a dark intelligence that is trying to hollow him out and replace him with itself. The carrying is heroism of the highest order. The carrying is the kind of heroism that does not make good cinema, does not photograph well, does not produce dramatic moments of visible triumph, does not give the audience the cathartic rush of watching a hero overcome an obstacle through strength and determination. The carrying is quiet heroism. The carrying is invisible heroism. The carrying is the heroism of endurance, the heroism of putting one foot in front of the other when every fibre of your being is screaming at you to stop. The distinction matters. The distinction between carrying and destroying is the distinction between human effort and divine grace. The carrying is within human capacity, barely, at the outer limit, at the absolute edge of what mortal endurance can achieve, but within capacity. The destroying is beyond human capacity, beyond any mortal's ability, beyond the limits of will and courage and moral strength, beyond the reach of anything that a finite being can do. Frodo accomplished everything that was within his power. Frodo achieved the maximum that a mortal being can achieve, and then grace, unearned, unpredictable, uncontrollable grace, accomplished the rest. The division of labor is theologically precise. Human effort does what human effort can do. Divine grace does what human effort cannot do. The two work together. The effort creates the conditions for the grace, and the grace produces the outcome that the effort cannot. Neither alone is sufficient. The effort without the grace is insufficient. The grace without the effort has no vessel, no mechanism, no point of application. The two together, the hobbit's carrying, and the universe's intervention, accomplish the impossible. Part 50. The Vindication. Tolkien vindicated Frodo. Not in the story speaks for itself, but in his letters, in his private correspondence, in the writings where he addressed readers' questions and critics' objections, Tolkien was clear. Frodo did not fail. Tolkien wrote that Frodo had exhibited extraordinary heroism. Heroism of a kind that the readers of adventure stories rarely recognize because it does not involve sword strokes or battle cries or moments of dramatic, visible triumph. Frodo's heroism is the heroism of endurance, the heroism of carrying, of bearing, of sustaining a burden that grows heavier with every step, that never relents, that demands everything and rewards nothing. Tolkien compared Frodo's situation to a soldier who has been fighting in the trenches for months. A soldier who has given everything, who has endured beyond the limits of endurance, who has held the line long past the point where any reasonable person would have broken. If that soldier at the very end, in the last moment, breaks, do we call him a failure? Do we dismiss his months of courage because of his final moment of collapse? No. We recognize the collapse as the consequence of the demand, the inevitable result of asking too much for too long, of pushing a human being past the point that human beings can be pushed. The collapse is not a moral judgment. The collapse is a medical fact, the body's refusal to continue when the body has been pushed beyond its limits. Frodo's failure at the crack of doom is the equivalent of a soldier's collapse. Not a moral failure, but an exhaustion failure. Not a deficiency of character, but an exceedance of capacity. Frodo did not lack the will to destroy the ring. Frodo's will was consumed by the effort of carrying the ring, spent, depleted, used up in the months of resistance that made the final moment possible. Part 51. What it means for the reader. The question why couldn't Frodo destroy the ring is, I think, ultimately a question about the reader, a question about how we understand heroism, about what we expect from the people we call heroes, about the standards we apply to the beings who carry our hopes. Most readers want heroes who succeed. Most readers want climaxes that feature the hero standing triumphant at the moment of crisis, overcoming the obstacle through courage and determination, and the sheer force of a will that refuses to bend. Most readers want the moment of glory, the moment when the hero proves himself, when the doubts are resolved, when the struggle pays off in a decisive, unmistakable, crowd-pleasing victory. Tolkien gives us something different. Tolkien gives us a hero who fails at the moment of crisis, a hero whose courage is undeniable, but whose will is insufficient, whose effort is superhuman, but whose achievement falls short of the mark. Tolkien gives us a climax that depends not on the hero's strength, but on the hero's mercy. Not on the hero's will, but on the hero's compassion. Not on the hero's power, but on the hero's willingness to spare a life that others would have taken. The difference is the message. Tolkien is saying, heroism is not about strength. Heroism is not about willpower. Heroism is not about the moment of crisis. Heroism is about the journey, about the carrying, about the endurance, about the daily, unglamorous, moment-by-moment choice to keep going when everything in you wants to stop. And heroism is about mercy, about the willingness to extend compassion to the undeserving, to spare the wretched, to show pity when pity seems foolish and dangerous, and contrary to every practical consideration. The hero of The Lord of the Rings is not the warrior who kills the dragon. The hero of The Lord of the Rings is the gardener's friend who carries a ring to a fire and shows mercy to a monster. And the mercy, not the carrying, is the act that saves the world. Part 52. The Ring's Legacy. The ring is destroyed, but the ring's legacy persists. The damage that the ring inflicted on the world does not disappear when the gold melts in the fire. The ring's legacy is the wounds that the ring's bearers carry, the wounds that the ring's wars have inflicted, the wounds that the ring's corruption has opened in the fabric of the world. Frodo's wound, the wound that will not heal, the wound that drives him across the sea to the Blessed Realm. Gollum's degradation, 500 years of life reduced to a crawling obsession, a personality consumed by possession, a person erased by an object. Sauron's destruction of Mordor, the scarred, poisoned, ash-covered wasteland that was once in the Elder Days, a land where rivers ran and trees grew. The scarring of the Shire, the mills and the smoke and the cut trees and the polluted water that Saruman inflicted in a petty, vindictive echo of Sauron's larger devastation. The departure of the elves, the fading of the immortal presence from Middle-earth, the withdrawal of the beauty and the wisdom that the elves carried, the diminishment of the world into the grey, disenchanted, magic-stripped reality that the Fourth Age inherits. The ring's legacy is also the absences. The absence of Boromir, who would have been one of Gondor's greatest leaders, but who was driven mad by the ring's temptation and died defending hobbits in a final act of redemption. The absence of Gandalf the Grey, who fell in Moria fighting a Balrog, fell because the Fellowship took the road through the mines, took the road because the ring's influence made the mountain pass impossible, died because the ring's presence drew the ancient evils of the deep. The absence of Thodin, who dies at the Pelennor Fields in a battle that exists only because the ring exists, in a war that would not have been fought if the ring had not been forged. The ring's legacy is also the lessons that the story teaches about the nature of power, about the corruption of good intentions, about the necessity of mercy, about the limits of will and the grace that operates beyond those limits. The ring's legacy is the understanding that evil cannot be fought with evil's own weapons. You cannot defeat the ring by becoming the ring. You cannot overcome the will to dominate by developing a stronger will to dominate. You cannot destroy the darkness by becoming darker. The only weapon that works against the ring is the weapon that the ring cannot corrupt, the weapon of mercy, of pity, of the simple, unglamorous, deeply counterintuitive choice to spare a life when every practical consideration says otherwise. The ring's legacy is the recognition that the world is saved not by the mighty but by the humble, not by those who sit on thrones but by those who sit in gardens, not by the lords of great kingdoms but by the hobbits of small shires, not by the wielders of legendary swords but by the bearers of cooking pots and seed packets and the ordinary tools of ordinary life. Part 53, the final answer. Why couldn't Frodo destroy the ring at the end? Because the ring, at the crack of doom, was irresistible. Because no being in Middle-earth, mortal or immortal, strong or weak, wise or simple, could have voluntarily cast the ring into the fire at the place of its making. Because the ring's power at its source was absolute, and the ring's corruption of its bearer was complete. And the paradox of destroying the ring through an act of will was unresolvable by any mortal effort. Because the ring was designed to be irresistible. Because Sauron, who forged the ring, built it to be the ultimate expression of the will to dominate, and the will to dominate cannot be overcome by a greater will. Because a greater will is itself an expression of domination, and domination is the ring's food. Because the quest was designed to fail at the last step. Because Tolkien, who built the story around the principle that evil cannot be defeated by human effort alone, designed the climax to demonstrate that principle in its purest form. The hero fails, the enemy wins. And then, unexpectedly, unearned, impossibly, grace intervenes. The creature that the hero spared becomes the instrument of the enemy's destruction. The mercy that seemed foolish becomes the mechanism of salvation. The accident that no one planned becomes the act of God that no one could have achieved. Frodo couldn't destroy the ring because the ring's destruction was never Frodo's to accomplish. Frodo's job was to carry the ring. Frodo's job was to show mercy. Frodo's job was to create the conditions in which grace could operate. And Frodo did his job perfectly, completely, at a cost that nearly destroyed him. The ring was destroyed by grace. And the grace was earned, not by willpower, not by strength, not by heroic self-overcoming, but by mercy, by the pity that Bilbo showed in the dark, by the mercy that Gandalf counselled in the firelight, by the compassion that Frodo extended on the road, by the cumulative, invisible, grace-producing power of every act of mercy that every character in the story chose to perform, from the goblin tunnels to the crack of doom. The answer is simple, and it is profound. Frodo couldn't destroy the ring, because the ring cannot be destroyed by will. The ring can only be destroyed by grace. And grace, in Tolkien's world, is the gift that is given to those who show mercy. Part 54. The deepest meaning. Let me leave you with this. The Lord of the Rings is a story about a ring. But the Lord of the Rings is not really about the ring. The Lord of the Rings is about the question that the ring raises. The question of how evil is overcome. The question of what force in the world is stronger than the will to dominate. The answer is not strength. The answer is not wisdom. The answer is not power or strategy or military force or political cunning. The answer is mercy. Mercy. The decision to spare when you could destroy, to forgive when you could punish, to show compassion when you could show indifference, is the force that breaks the cycle. Mercy is the act that creates space for grace. Mercy is the seed that produces the harvest that the sower never expected to reap. Frodo shows mercy to Gollum. The mercy seems foolish. The mercy seems dangerous. The mercy seems like a failure of judgment, a capitulation to sentimentality, a refusal to face the hard realities of the situation. And the mercy saves the world. This is what Tolkien learned in the trenches of the Somme. in the ruins of a world that tried to defeat evil with greater force, and discovered that force breeds more force, that violence breeds more violence, that the will to dominate, even the will to dominate in a just cause, produces outcomes that are indistinguishable from the evil it seeks to destroy. Tolkien's answer to the problem of evil is not a warrior. Tolkien's answer is a gardener's friend carrying a ring to a fire. Tolkien's answer is not strength but mercy, not will but grace, not the sword that cuts but the hand that spares. The lesson is not easy. The lesson is not comfortable. The lesson says that the most important acts are the ones whose consequences you cannot see, that the mercy you show today may save the world tomorrow, that the compassion you extend toward the least deserving may be the force that overcomes the greatest evil. Frodo could not destroy the ring, but Frodo could show mercy, and the mercy was enough. Thank you for spending this evening with me. The story of the ring is the story of the limit of will and the limitlessness of grace. It is the story of a hobbit who carried a burden that no one else could carry, who showed mercy that no one else would show, and who failed at the last step, not because he was weak, but because the last step was not his to take. The last step belonged to grace. And grace, as it always does in Tolkien's world, arrived at the moment when all hope was lost. Until next time.